Chapter 40, 3:14. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, looked at the white-eyed wolf, and said, "Take them to reconstruct their bodies." "Why are you still helping them reconstruct their bodies? Directly deprive them of their ultimate profound." The white-eyed wolf frowned. Qin Feiyang said, "If they don't have their bodies, how can they help us lure out Dong Yiming and the others?" "That's right. If we don't help them reconstruct their bodies, or deprive them of their ultimate profound now, when Dong Yiming and the others see it, they will definitely be suspicious." Madman nodded. "All right." The white-eyed wolf led the three of them to Qin Feiyang and the mermaid princess courtyard. Madman looked at the backs of the middle-aged man and sighed. "Old Qin, now we have to seize the time to cultivate talents." "Yes. At present, we still have more than 50,000 ultimate profound of the strongest law. We can cultivate more than 9,000 people. But where can we find these people?" Qin Feiyang frowned. There were indeed many creatures in the Black Tortoise realm, but there weren't many who had stepped into the sovereign realm. There were quite a few from the three major races. Moreover, if the people of the three major races could maximize the value of these inheritances, because the three major races had many people who had mastered one or two ultimate profound of the strongest law. If they were to cultivate them, they could save a lot of inheritances. However, among the three major races, except for the monarch, the divine king, and Jizun, the others weren't really close. He always felt that it wasn't worth it to cultivate them. So, even if it was to cultivate, Qin Feiyang also wanted to cultivate the people around him. "Why don't we return to the Sky Cloud realm?" Madman asked. In the Sky Cloud realm, there were many creatures in the sovereign realm. Not to mention the dragons, the foam people, the Kirin race, even the human race, the beast race, and the sea beast race were a lot. "Return to the Sky Cloud realm," Qin Feiyang murmured. The gate to the divine kingdom was sealed in the land of origin and could be unsealed at any time. And now, the ruler of the divine kingdom was being held back by the ice dragon and the small beast. The three major races had already formed an alliance with them, so it was not impossible for them to return to the Sky Cloud realm. However, Qin Feiyang had a doubt in his mind. What if the gate of the divine kingdom secretly caused mischief and cut off the connection between the divine kingdom and the Sky Cloud realm? How could they return to the divine kingdom? If that really happened, they would lose the initiative that they had fought so hard for. Because if the gate of the divine kingdom was secretly causing trouble, they would not be able to return to the divine kingdom. However, the people of the central dynasty could descend upon the Sky Cloud realm at any time. At that time, the Sky Cloud realm would become a battlefield again. In the past, the three major races had already plunged the Sky Cloud realm into misery and suffering, not to mention the Death God army of the Central Dynasty. Once the Death God army arrives, the Sky Cloud realm will be destroyed in minutes. This bet was too risky, unless they could control or persuade the gate of the divine kingdom to help them. But whether it was control or persuasion, there seemed to be little hope, because if they had the ability to control the gate of the divine kingdom, they would have already done so when they first entered the divine kingdom. After pondering for a moment, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and two figures appeared in front of him. It was Pai Lupi and Theta Wang. "How's your cultivation?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. The two looked at each other and smiled, saying, "We have already integrated 2 inheritances." "Not bad. You're quite efficient." Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile. The two rubbed their heads, looking charmingly naive. Qin Feiyang said, "Help me investigate something first." "What is it?" The two were suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, "Check how many rulers have been born in our Black Tortoise realm." "Okay." Pai Lupi and Theta Wang nodded and immediately turned to leave without asking for the reason. A moment later, the white-eyed wolf returned with the middle-aged man and the other two. Their bodies had been reconstructed. Their bodies didn't change much, and they were still burly, but their appearances were completely different, because now they had recovered their true appearances. Qin Feiyang stood up and appeared in the sky above the shattered mountain range with the three, the mad scientist and the white-eyed wolf. Then he looked at one of them and took out an illusory form pill, ordering, "Go to Qingtian City now and bring Dong Yiming and the others to Thousand Phoenix Mountain." Yes, the person nodded respectfully, took the illusory form pill, and changed back to his previous appearance. Then he opened a time passage and left. Because the divine sound transmission stone had been shattered along with their bodies, they could only go personally. The white-eyed wolf asked, "What method did you use to instantly repair your Qi-Si?" "It's a forbidden technique called the regeneration technique. Not only can it repair the Qi-Si, but it can also repair the shattered body. However, it can only be activated once a day, and it requires a certain price, using one's Qi and blood as a guide and burning one's vitality." The two answered truthfully. So that's how it is. The three of them were enlightened. Could it be that they didn't activate the regeneration technique after their bodies were shattered? It turned out that it could only be activated once a day. The mad scientist asked, "Everyone in the Death God Army has mastered the regeneration technique." Yes, the two nodded. The mad scientist was puzzled. Then why didn't Dong Laifu and Dong Qingyuan master the regeneration technique? Because when they fought, Dong Laifu and Dong Qingyuan didn't activate the regeneration technique. The regeneration technique can only be obtained by the members of the Death God Army. Dong Laifu is Dong Qingyuan's servant, not a member of our Death God Army. As for Dong Qingyuan, he's going to self-destruct anyway, so there's no need to activate the regeneration technique. The two said, "Dong Laifu is not a member of the Death God Army?" Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other. This was a little surprising. At the same time, Qingtian City, in a restaurant, Dong Yiming and the others had changed their appearances and sat around a table. They silently drank wine while listening to the discussions of the guests around them. The topic of discussion in the four great continents was naturally the shady business that Dong Qingyuan had done. Dong Yiming and the others could clearly hear that no one was hiding anything from the central dynasty. "Sai, I really didn't expect our leader to do such a stupid thing." Someone couldn't help but sigh secretly. A good hand was ruined by their leader. Our leader is indeed a little inconsiderate in this matter, but according to our understanding of our leader, he doesn't seem to be someone who doesn't know his limits. Is there even a need to think about it? He must have been angered by Qin Feiyang and the others and lost his mind. These little bastards are really capable. Just as the group of people were secretly discussing, a middle-aged man silently walked in. "Sir, this way, please." A waiter hurriedly went up to welcome him. The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "I'm looking for someone." After saying that, he scanned the hall and soon saw Dong Yiming and the others. Then he walked straight over. Seeing this, the waiter ignored him. When Dong Yiming noticed the middle-aged man, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. When the middle-aged man walked closer, Dong Yiming transmitted his voice. "Didn't I ask you to keep an eye on Thousand Phoenix Mountain? What are you doing here in Qingtian City?" "There's a change in Thousand Phoenix Mountain," the middle-aged man whispered. "What?" The 8 people's expressions changed slightly and asked, "What change?" "You'll know when you get there." The middle-aged man didn't say it very clearly because if he did, he would give himself away. After saying this, the middle-aged man opened a space-time passage and looked very anxious. He didn't want to give Dong Yiming and the others time to think. Seeing this, Dong Yiming indeed didn't think carefully. He took out some soul stones and placed them on the table. Then he immediately got up and led the other 7 people into the space-time passage. These people have mastered the law of time. They're a bit secretive. When the guests in the hall saw this scene, they couldn't help but be surprised. Because Dong Yiming and the others' performance in the restaurant was very mediocre. Everyone thought that they were just ordinary people. Under the night sky, Thousand Phoenix Mountain looked even more messy. There was no trace of a beast in the surroundings. It was dead silent. Now, the beasts in this area had already regarded Thousand Phoenix Mountain as a forbidden area. All of this was because Qin Feiyang and the others often appeared in Thousand Phoenix Mountain. Sometimes the birth of a forbidden area was that simple. Buzz! In the sky, a space-time passage appeared. Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other and smiled. This was because they had already sensed the aura of the burly man in the space-time passage. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and 3,000 clones appeared, surrounding the space-time tunnel in 3 layers. When Dong Yiming and the others walked out of the passage, they would be turtles in a jar. Finally, under the anticipation of Qin Feiyang and the other two, the burly man was the first to walk out, followed by Dong Yiming and the others. What's going on? As soon as they appeared, they immediately saw the 3,000 clones around them and their expressions froze. Welcome to Thousand Phoenix Mountain. The white-eyed wolf opened his mouth, and his voice broke the silence of the night sky. It was particularly loud. The 8 of them were shocked and hurriedly looked down. When they saw Qin Feiyang and the other 2 below, their expressions changed drastically. Bastards, you actually betrayed us. Dong Yiming glared at the 3 burly men and roared. Now it was obvious. There was no change in Thousand Phoenix Mountain at all. This was a trap set by Qin Feiyang and the other 2. Therefore, while roaring, he opened a space-time passage and prepared to escape. The 3,000 clones erupted with a terrifying aura and rushed forward, shattering the space-time passage that had just been opened. Why did you betray us? Dong Yiming roared. Don't you understand? The members of the Death God Army were carefully selected by the Emperor and the ruler. Loyalty is definitely the most important factor. So how could they betray us? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Dong Yiming was stunned and suddenly recorded something. Looking at the 3 burly men, he said in a deep voice, You controlled them. That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Why did you do this? We have no enmity with you. Dong Yiming's face was as calm as water. Are you still planning to act? How childish. Just cripple them. They just had to pretend to be ordinary people again. This kind of ignorant trick was enough to see at once. As Qin Feiyang's voice fell, the 3,000 clones attacked and directly crushed the 8 of them like a hot knife through butter, not giving them the slightest chance to resist. With a series of screams, the 8 of them were crushed one after another and blood stained the sky. But suddenly, accompanied by a loud clang, a divine weapon rushed out from Dong Yiming's broken body, swept up the 8 people's divine souls and fled frantically. High-level ruler divine weapon. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 were stunned. They didn't expect there to be an unexpected surprise. End of chapter. Chapter 40, 315. Dong Yiming's sovereign divine weapon was a divine hammer. It was more than 2 meters long and was purple gold in color. It was surrounded by the power of thunder and lightning, exuding a mighty aura. Judging from its aura, it was a high-grade, sovereign divine weapon. Thunder deity hammer, hurry up and kill them. Dong Yiming's divine soul roared. Because they had been changing their appearances and hiding their identities, and because it was their first time in the 4 great continents, he thought that no one would know their identities. So, they didn't split their divine souls in advance to save their lives. If they fell into the hands of Qin Feiyang and the other 2, they would die. The thunder deity hammer shone with dazzling divine light and carried a wave of thunder and lightning toward the 3,000 clones, hoping to kill their way out. However, they ignored it. How could a high-grade sovereign divine weapon defeat Qin Feiyang's 3,000 clones? Boom! Ultimate Intents appeared one after another. The 3,000 clones had only activated the ultimate intents of the law of life and death. They hadn't even activated the will of the heavenly Tao. Even so, seeing the 3,000 ultimate intents of the law of life and death, Dong Yiming and the others, including the Thunder Deity Hammer, couldn't help but fall into despair. The law of life and death was above the ultimate laws. The kingdom of life and death was enough to fight against 6 ultimate laws. One could imagine how terrifying the power of the 3,000th kingdom of life and death was. Crack! The Thunder Deity Hammer shattered on the spot. The blazing light dimmed as well. More than half of the divine souls of Dong Yiming and the others disappeared on the spot. They were terrified to the extreme. "Don't kill them!" The white-eyed wolf hurriedly shouted. "Got it." The 3,000 clones spoke. As they waved their hands, the kingdom of life and death dissipated in an instant. The remnant souls of Dong Yiming and the others and the fragments of the Thunder Deity Hammer floated in the broken void, trembling. Was this Qin Feiyang's strength? He was like a heavenly god, without a large army who would dare to fight against him. Qin Feiyang looked at the Thunder Deity Hammer and said lightly, "Surrender to us now, or you will be destroyed." Although his tone was calm, it contained a great sense of oppression. The Thunder Immortal Hammer trembled and flew to the front of Qin Feiyang, like a subject and a king. "Not bad, very sensible. Make a blood oath." Qin Feiyang chuckled. If it was a low-level Dominator divine weapon, with his current foundation, he wouldn't care much about it. But a high-level Dominator divine weapon was rare even in the Divine Kingdom. Furthermore, a high-grade sovereign weapon already had the power to crush an expert with will of the heavens. Therefore, as long as he could subdue it, he would try his best to do so. After the Thunder Immortal Hammer made the blood oath, Qin Feiyang looked at Dong Yiming and the others. As soon as the 8 of them saw Qin Feiyang's eyes, they immediately lost all hope and chose to destroy their own souls. Otherwise, they would become puppets in the hands of Qin Feiyang and the others like the 3 big men. How can there be so many naive people in this world? Madman shook his head. He took a step forward and landed in front of the 8 remnant souls, directly suppressing them. It was impossible for them to destroy themselves. What a joke! The 8 of them were existences that had grasped the will of the heavens and had dozens of ultimate mysteries. How could he let them go to hell with their ultimate mysteries? If they wanted to go to hell, they had to leave behind their ultimate mysteries first. Not bad. Another 66 ultimate mysteries. The white-eyed wolf bared his teeth. There were a total of 11 people, and each of them had 6 ultimate mysteries. That's not right. Madman took the remnant souls of the 8 people and landed in front of the white-eyed wolf, shaking his head. "What do you mean?" The white-eyed wolf was puzzled. "This Dong Yiming is the deputy commander of the 10th team. He definitely has more than 6 ultimate mysteries." Madman bared his teeth. "Yeah." The white-eyed wolf patted his head and asked Dong Yiming, "Old man, how many ultimate mysteries do you have?" Dong Yiming's divine soul was silent as he stared at Qin Feiyang and the others with eyes full of hatred. "Not going to open your mouth? All right, let's go back to the black tortoise world." The white-eyed wolf sneered. "As long as you fall into their hands, it's best to learn to cooperate to avoid suffering." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and led the group into the Devil's Land. Next, naturally, they had to find Long Qin. This time, Long Qin didn't complain because Qin Feiyang told him the general situation of the Death God army. Knowing these things, Long Qin's face suddenly became very dignified. The 10th team had a total of 10,000 members. It was hard to imagine how many there would be if the 10 teams were added together. It seemed that they had to think of a way to seize more ultimate mysteries. I agreed to go back to the Sky Cloud world. However, we must deal with the gate of the Divine Kingdom in advance. Before Qin Feiyang and the others left, Long Qin said the sentence. "Tea garden." The white-eyed wolf looked at Dong Yiming's remnant soul and joked. "Now tell me, how many ultimate mysteries have you mastered?" 8. This time, Dong Yiming was very cooperative. What was asked, what was the answer? 8. So, except for the law of light and darkness and the law of life and death, you have mastered all the ultimate mysteries. The white-eyed wolf was stunned. Yes. Dong Yiming nodded. Haha, not bad, not bad. The white-eyed wolf laughed. In this way, the 11 people in front of them contributed 68 ultimate mysteries of the ultimate mysteries of the ultimate mysteries of the heavenly Tao to them. Madman glanced at the 11 people, his eyes flickered, and said, "Old Qin, why don't we keep them?" Huh. Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf couldn't help but look at Madman. Although depriving them of their inheritance can allow us to create other heavenly Tao powerhouses, it will take a lot of time to do so. And now what we need the most is time. Madman frowned. Makes sense, but have you thought about it? The white-eyed wolf nodded, but then he changed the topic and continued. These people are all controlled by Longqin. They have nothing to do with us. But isn't Longqin as close as brothers with us now? You still don't believe him? Madman was suspicious. The white-eyed wolf hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, I definitely believe him. But I don't believe Ice Dragon, and I don't believe Long Zun. What you said makes sense. Qin Feiyang glanced at the two, then looked at Madman and said, But I'm more inclined to believe the white-eyed wolf. We have to be careful of Ice Dragon and Long Zun. If we keep these people, they might become a problem in the future. Madman pondered for a while and said with a strange expression, Now I'm really doubting whether Longqin is the biological son of Ice Dragon and Long Zun. Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf heard this and couldn't help but smile bitterly. They had doubted this question more than once. Longqin must be the biological son of the two. Although Longqin had changed a lot now, she was almost exactly the same as Ice Dragon and Long Zun in the past. No, the current Longqin was no different from before. It was just different from person to person. Now in front of them, she was indeed very good, like a cute little sister. But in front of outsiders or enemies, she had a different attitude. But Longqin was different. Up until now, he had always been a kind-hearted and righteous person. He was completely different from Ice Dragon and Long Zun. Why don't we investigate Longqin's identity? Maybe we can find out some big secrets. The white-eyed wolf bared his teeth. For example, Madman looked at him with interest. The white-eyed wolf pondered for a while, and his eyes suddenly lit up. He bared his teeth and said, For example, he might be the illegitimate son of Long Zun and Yi Zhong. Yi Zhong? Madman was slightly taken aback and nodded. There's really this possibility because Yi Zhong has always been by Long Zun's side, and Ice Dragon is not around all year round. As the saying goes, a single man and a single woman, love grows over time. Hey. What nonsense are you talking about? Seeing that Madman's words were getting more and more ridiculous, Qin Feiyang's face couldn't help but darken, and he stared at the two of them angrily. Madman bared his teeth and said, We are just making a reasonable analysis. You see Yi Zhong is highly respected and cares about the common people. Stop. Qin Feiyang hurriedly raised his hand and said angrily, Stop your imagination right now. What the hell was this? Just because Longqin and Yi Zhong's characters were similar, they said that they were related? In this world, there seemed to be a lot of kind-hearted and loyal people. Moreover, Yi Zhong was his master. In front of him, he said that about his master. Did he ever consider his feelings? Ha! Madman and white-eyed wolf laughed awkwardly. Fortunately, Longqin wasn't here at the moment. Otherwise, if he heard these words, he would definitely fall out with the two of them. Next, Qin Feiyang asked Dong Yiming and the others to extract their ultimate meaning, and then asked Dong Yiming to destroy their own divine souls. Indeed, as the three burly men said, even as the deputy commander of the 10th team, Dong Yiming didn't know the situation of the other 9 teams. It seemed that this matter still depended on the inner demons and Lu Jijin. Whoosh! 3 days later, Pai Lupi and Madman broke through the air and arrived. Where are Brother Wolf and Brother Madman? The two of them were suspicious. I don't know where they went to fool around. Qin Feiyang shook his head. 3 days ago, after Dong Yiming and the others destroyed their own divine souls, the two of them disappeared without a trace. Pai Lupi shook his head and laughed. We have already checked the creatures of the Black Tortoise world. Currently, there are only about 500 people who have stepped into the sovereign realm, and most of them are only half-step sovereigns. That's it. Qin Feiyang frowned. And this includes the beasts. The two of them nodded. Sigh. It seems that although the Black Tortoise world is growing very fast, its foundation is still too weak. Qin Feiyang sighed. Not to mention divine. Even the Sky Cloud realm was far inferior. But Pai Lupi hesitated for a moment and said, there are quite a few Yun family in Zhongzhou. Yun family? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Pai Lupi said, it's Yun Xiang's family, Yun Zhongtian, Yun Zhongyue, and Yun Guanghui. Yes, how could I forget them? The Yun family used to be a noble family in the Sky Cloud realm. There must be many sovereign realm clansmen. Qin Feiyang patted his head and looked at the two of them with a smile. Why do you hesitate when mentioning the Yun family? The two of them wanted to say something, but hesitated. Chapter 40, 3:16. Could it be that someone from the Yun family isn't being honest? Qin Feiyang frowned. There must be a reason why the two of them were so hesitant, and this reason was the most likely. That's not it. They have been very honest all these years, including Yun, Guanghui's brothers. Pai Lupi and Theta Wang hurriedly waved their hands. Not it. Qin Feiyang was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, then why? Sigh. Li Er let out a long sigh. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, young master, I'll say something I shouldn't say. Although the Yun family has a good relationship with us, they don't belong to the Black Tortoise realm. That's right. In the Black Tortoise world, with your deterrence, no matter how strong they become, they won't dare to act rashly. However, they can't always stay in the Black Tortoise world. Sooner or later, they will leave the Black Tortoise world and return to the Sky Cloud world. If you nurture the Yun family now, and let them give birth to a large number of experts with the will of the heavenly Tao, when they return to the Sky Cloud world, they will be the strongest. Theta Wang said. Continue. Qin Feiyang held the teacup, his eyes flashing. The Yun family couldn't always stay in the Black Tortoise world. Sooner or later, they would return to the Sky Cloud world. If you stay in the Sky Cloud world in the future, the Yun family won't dare to act rashly because of your strength and prestige. However, your home is in the great Qin Empire. Sooner or later, you will return to your roots. Think about it. When you return to the great Qin Empire, the Yun family will rely on their strength to do whatever they want in the Sky Cloud world. At that time, who will be able to keep them in check? Pai Lupi said worriedly. Return to my roots, Qin Feiyang murmured and smiled. I didn't expect you to understand me so well. Pai Lupi and Theta Wang looked at each other and smiled. We have been by your side for so many years. How could we not know what your wish is? Then wouldn't we have been blinded? Qin Feiyang laughed in spite of himself and said, continue talking about the Yun family. Back then, in the Sky Cloud realm, the Yun family and the He family fought to the death. Although it seemed that the He family was in the wrong, in fact, these two families were not good people. Furthermore, in this world, not everyone is like you, young master, who doesn't care about fame and fortune. Most people will continue to swell as they become stronger and gradually develop ambitions. The Yun family is not a saint. Perhaps in the beginning, they will maintain a low profile, stay in a corner, and stand aloof from worldly affairs. But who can guarantee that they can maintain this forever? Even if Yun Zhongtian and Yun Guanghui can, what about Yun Guangyao and the others? you should still remember. Back then, when the Yun family had just entered the Black Tortoise world, there were some disciples of the Yun family who went to the 3 major regions to bully others. In the end, when we taught them a lesson, Yun Guangyao and the others resented us. From this matter, it can be seen that these people are not good people. If they are allowed to gain power when they return to the Sky Cloud realm, I'm afraid that the flames of war that you have spent so many years in the Sky Cloud realm will burn again. It may even be more terrifying than before. Pai Lupi said in a deep voice. That's right. If the Yun family really has any ambitions, then the Feng people, the human race, the dragons, the Qilin clan, and even the Lord Rabbit of the Sky Cloud Sea and the Azure Dragon of the Land of Buried Gods will not be able to escape. Theta Wang also nodded in agreement, deeply worried. Qin Feiyong's heart trembled as he looked up at the two. What's wrong? Did we say something wrong? If so, just pretend that we didn't say anything. The two said with some fear. Don't be nervous, don't be nervous. I just feel very surprised. Because of these interests, I didn't even think about it. Qin Feiyong shook his head. You have too many things on your hands. Moreover, facing the powerful central dynasty, you are under too much pressure. It's normal that you didn't think about it. The two laughed dryly. Are you trying to say that I'm too impatient for success? Qin Feiyong smiled. No. The two hurriedly waved their hands. You too, after being together for so many years, you understand me. But do you think I don't understand you? To be honest, you really woke me up. At this stage, I'm too impatient for success, so I didn't think about many details. Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. It couldn't be helped. The Death God Army gave him too much pressure. We didn't say that. You admitted it yourself. Pai Lupi chuckled. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. After pondering for a moment, he sighed. It seems that the most appropriate method is to train our own people. Yes, the two nodded. But there are only a little more than 500 rulers in the Black Tortoise realm. How can this be enough? The Death God Army has 10 teams. If each team has 10,000 people, then there will be 100,000 experts with heavenly will. And this doesn't include the 5,000 experts with heavenly will in the Central Dynasty. If the Central Dynasty comes out in full force, whether it's us, the 3 races of the Divine Kingdom, or the Sky Cloud Realm, we will all be destroyed. Qin Feiyong sighed. So many? The two were dumbfounded. Otherwise, why would I be so impatient for success? Qin Feiyong smiled helplessly. It seems that you are under a lot of pressure. Pai Lupi murmured. It's more than just pressure. If it were us, we would have already collapsed. It's not easy for the young master to be able to hold on. Theta Wang sighed. He admired Qin Feiyong from the bottom of his heart. Fearless, brave, determined, responsible, in the tea garden. There was a brief silence. Qin Feiyong held a teacup, sipping tea while pondering. Pai Lupi and Theta Wang stood aside. A moment later, Qin Feiyong sat down and made a decision. He looked up at the two and said, I'll give you another task. Please tell us. The two bowed. Build a holy land in our Black Tortoise realm. Whether it's humans or beasts, as long as they have the talent and pass the test, they can enter the Holy Land to cultivate. Qin Feiyong said, Holy Land? The two were stunned. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded and asked with a smile, Now, in the eyes of our Black Tortoise realm, the Devil's Land should be a holy land for cultivation. It's not just a holy land. For the Black Tortoise realm, the Devil's Land is the most supreme place in the Black Tortoise realm. And among the people, there are countless rumors about the Devil's Land. In short, to be able to enter the Devil's Land and take a look, many people can die without regrets. The two smiled slightly. The Devil's Land can't be casually stepped in. After all, this is our foundation. Qin Feiyong smiled. The two nodded. This was understandable. If anyone could step into the Devil's Land, wouldn't it be a mess? Since they can't come to the devil's land, I'll create a holy land for them. I'll give them the best resources, the best cultivation environment, the most powerful divine arts, divine artifacts, and profound laws. As long as they're willing to work hard, they can get everything. Qin Feiyong smiled. In that case, the scale of the Holy Land must be very large, because I can already predict that once the news of the birth of a Holy Land spreads, the Black Tortoise realm will definitely flock here. Pai Lupi smiled. You can't just recruit anyone into the Holy Land. They must pass the test. Of course. The test is just a standard. You'll have to observe the actual situation carefully. After all, sometimes talent doesn't mean everything. Some have mediocre talent, but outstanding perseverance. Some seem to be slow, but little do you know that they're wise but stupid, a late bloomer. Some have good talent, but their mentality isn't strong and their character isn't good. It'll be difficult for them to achieve great things. In short, you must supervise all of this. This is your only task now, to establish this holy land for me. You can think of this as a death order from me. The future Holy Land will be the pillar of our Black Tortoise realm. Qin Feiyong said each word with a pause. What about the management of the Black Tortoise realm? The two asked. As for the management of the Black Tortoise realm, I'll let Pei Dason and Pei Hongyu come back. After all, they already have experience and can quickly get used to it. Qin Feiyong smiled. The two hesitated. What's wrong? Do you think that I'm neglecting you by not letting you manage the Black Tortoise realm? Qin Feiyong asked with a smile. He could tell at a glance what these two fellows were thinking. No. The two hurriedly shook their heads. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled. Let me tell you, creating a holy land is a heavy responsibility. It's because I trust you that I'm handing this responsibility to you. Think about it. The Black Tortoise realm has already stabilized, and everything is going according to plan. There's no need to manage it at all. However, the Holy Land is different. Everything in the Holy Land will have to start anew. If it weren't for someone with some ability, I wouldn't have dared to hand such an important task to him. Therefore, instead of neglecting you, I value you even more and put you in an important position. Qin Feiyong explained with a smile. The two looked at each other. It turned out that he valued them even more and entrusted them with an important task. They bowed and said, Understood. We promise to complete the task. You can choose the location of the Holy Land. You can allocate the resources of the Black Tortoise realm as you wish. When the time comes, I'll also instruct Pei Dason and Pei Hongyu to fully cooperate with you. In short, you can do whatever you want. I hope to see a large number of living beings step into the sovereign realm in the shortest time possible. Qin Feiyong said. Yes. The two bowed and replied. If Pei Dason and Pei Hongyu were to cooperate with them, wouldn't their status in the Black Tortoise realm be higher than it was now? The most important thing was they could also allocate the resources of the Black Tortoise realm as they wished. One had to know, no matter where, resources were undoubtedly the most important. Usually, they were handed over to the most trusted people to manage. This was enough to prove the degree of trust Qin Feiyong had in them. Go. Let me see the results as soon as possible. Qin Feiyong smiled slightly. Yes. The two bowed and replied. Then they soared into the sky and flew away like lightning. Chapter 40, 3:17. Looking at the disappearing figures of the two, Qin Feiyong revealed a trace of a smile on his face. Sure enough, no matter how good a steed is, it still needs a talent scout. Although it was a bit of a boast for Pai Lupi and Theta Wong, he was this talent scout. With a thought, two more figures appeared beside him. They were a man and a woman, both middle-aged. It was Pei Dason and Pei Hongyu. Both of them were in seclusion in the central continent to fuse with the inheritance. At this moment, they were suddenly brought to the devil's land by Qin Feiyang. However, when they saw Qin Feiyang sitting at the side, the two hurriedly bowed and saluted. "Greetings, young master." Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, "Have a seat." The brother and sister looked at each other and walked to the opposite side of Qin Feiyang and sat down. "Are you very puzzled as to why I suddenly called you over?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. The brother and sister nodded. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "I need you to continue to assist the Fire Lotus and manage the affairs of the Black Tortoise realm." Huh. The brother and sister looked at each other. This was too unexpected. "Where are Pai Lupi and Theta Wong?" Pei Dason asked. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "They have more important tasks to do. In the future, they won't have time to manage the Black Tortoise realm." More important tasks? The two were surprised. What task was more important than managing the Black Tortoise realm? "When the time comes, you can ask them directly. In addition, if they have any needs in the future, you must fully cooperate," Qin Feiyang reminded. "Yes." The brother and sister stood up and replied, unable to hide the joy in their hearts. Who was the most powerful in the Black Tortoise realm? It was undoubtedly Qin Feiyang, because Qin Feiyang was the ruler of the Black Tortoise realm. Only by following him would they be able to obtain extraordinary status and glory. Although they didn't say anything during these years in the Central State, they were actually quite disappointed in their hearts. From their point of view, Qin Feiyang telling them to put aside the matters of the Black Tortoise realm and return to the Central Plains was equivalent to exiling them. But fortunately, now, Qin Feiyang was using them again. He swore, silently in his heart. In the future, he had to work harder and strive to stay in the Devil's Land forever. Just like what Pai Lupi and Theta Wong had said before, the Devil's Land was now the most supreme place in the Black Tortoise world. It was a great honor to be able to enter the Devil's Land and take a look. Pei Dason and Pei Hongyu were no exception. Therefore, they wanted to stay here for the rest of their lives. "I know that you all are very experienced now, but you can't be arrogant. If there's anything important in the future, don't make decisions on your own. Ask Fire Lotus first," Qin Feiyang instructed. "Understood." The two of them nodded. "All right, go down first." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. "This subordinate will take his leave." The brother and sister turned around, smiled at each other, and strode away with a happy mood. Is the Devil's Land really that tempting? Qin Feiyang frowned and glanced around. He was in the Devil's Land every day and didn't feel that there was anything special about it. It was precisely because he was in the Devil's Land every day that he had long been accustomed to everything here. So he didn't feel that there was anything attractive about it. Immediately after, he closed his eyes and released his perception. Soon, his expression froze, and he muttered suspiciously, "Why is this woman still in the village?" Immediately he got up. With a thought, the next moment, he appeared in the sky above a small village. There weren't many people in the village, but they were all very kind, especially the old people in the village, who looked kind and amiable at first glance. "Lord Ruler, look, the Lord Ruler is here." There was a 7 or 8-year-old child in the village. After seeing Qin Feiyang, he rubbed his small eyes in disbelief and then shouted, "Lord Ruler? Little brat, who are you fooling? How could the Lord Ruler come to our small place?" A slightly older youth patted the child's head. "It's true. Look for yourself." The little brat pointed to the sky. And the older youth saw that the little brat didn't seem to be joking and immediately looked up. His expression was immediately stunned. "It's really the Lord Ruler's divine weapon," he muttered. When he came back to his senses, he suddenly became alert and shouted, "Father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, uncle, aunt, come out quickly. The Lord Ruler has come to our village." His voice was much louder than the little brat's. Whether it was the villagers in the house or the villagers hunting nearby, they all ran out and looked up at the sky. It really is the Lord Ruler. He is the idol I have always admired. I didn't expect to see him in person today. A 13 or 14-year-old youth murmured, his eyes full of worship. At the same time, not far away, a woman in a white dress was leading a group of children to catch crabs in a small stream. It's really the Lord Ruler. Let's go over quickly. Even a 3 or 4-year-old snot-nosed child recognized Qin Feiyang, because at the entrance of the village stood a statue. This statue was more than 10 meters tall, with a slender figure and a clear outline. It was like a god guarding the village. This statue was Qin Feiyang. In the current Black Tortoise realm, whether it was the bustling cities or the remote villages, there was a stone statue of Qin Feiyang erected. In short, these children had all grown up looking at the stone statue. So, how could they not recognize Qin Feiyang? Immediately, the group of youths threw away the crabs in their hands and ran toward the village excitedly. It's really delicious. The woman in the white dress pouted. This person was Long Qin. A day in the outside world was 5,000 years in the Black Tortoise realm. According to the time in the Black Tortoise realm, she had been in this village for many years. Over the years, she had personally witnessed generations of youths in the village grow up and step into the mortal world to experience and make their way. Some people made a name for themselves and gained both fame and fortune. There were also people who returned sadly, living in seclusion in the village, getting married and having children. Therefore, over the years, Long Qin had a very deep understanding of life. Her state of mind was also far beyond the past. At this time, there was no longer the arrogance of the past on her body. Instead, there was a touch of the mortal world, like an ordinary woman. "Greetings, Lord Ruler." The old people in the village rose into the air and respectfully bowed in front of Qin Feiyang. The smiles on their faces were extremely bright. Qin Feiyang glanced at Long Qin by the stream and looked at the villagers in front of him. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "No need to be so polite. Just treat me as an ordinary person." "No, I am an ordinary person." "Lord Ruler is too humble. How can you be an ordinary person?" "If you are an ordinary person, then what are we?" The people in the village were a little flattered. The rumors were true. This ruler was amiable and approachable. The group of children below could not help but mutter, "Is this the big brother next door?" "Yes, I'm the same as that beautiful sister. I'm your big brother next door." Qin Feiyang landed in front of the group of children and pointed at Long Qin by the stream and said with a smile. A 7 or 8-year-old child turned his head to look at Long Qin. His eyes rolled, and he suddenly said, "So Big Brother is here to look for Sister Long." Qin Feiyang looked at the child and said with a smile, "Little one, you're quite smart. What's your name?" "My name is Yi Qin." This name was given to me by Sister Long. Little Yi Qin raised his little head and said with a rather proud look, "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang had an astonished look on his face as he asked, "Then does big Sister Long treat you well?" "Yes. Everyone in our village likes Sister Long, because not only does she take us to play, but she also teaches us to cultivate." Many brothers and sisters in our village became famous geniuses in the northern region under Sister Long's guidance. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was so kind, the group of teenagers gradually let go of their courage and surrounded Qin Feiyang, chattering nonstop. The adults and elders at the side couldn't help but sweat. It was true that a newborn calf was not afraid of a tiger, because in the hearts of these adults and elders, no matter how approachable Qin Feiyang was, he was still the ruler of the Black Tortoise realm. So, out of instinctive respect, they didn't dare to be so presumptuous. Suddenly, a teenager moved in front of Qin Feiyang, grabbed Qin Feiyang's hand, and said mysteriously, "Big brother, I'll tell you a secret." "What secret?" Qin Feiyang was curious. "My grandfather once went to the western region to donate blood." The youth said, "Donate blood?" Qin Feiong was stunned. He turned his head to look at the crowd and asked, "Really?" "Really. Father taught me since I was young that I must be honest and not lie to others." The teenager listened and said with a straight back, "Be honest," Qin Feiong murmured. These words, who knew how many people would lower their heads in shame? Because in this world of mutual deception, the word honesty had become very cheap. Some people, I'm afraid, have never spoken a word of truth in their entire life. Every day was spent in lies. How could they be honest? After traveling to so many continents, it seemed that the people of the Black Tortoise realm were simple and honest. Even such a child knew the value of honesty. Seeing that Qin Feiong was silent, the teenager looked at Qin Feiong innocently and asked, "Did I say something wrong?" No. I'm just thinking, if you tell me this secret now, won't it no longer be a secret in the future?" Qin Feiong laughed. "That's right." The teenager slapped his head, looking a little angry. Qin Fei laughed involuntarily, rubbed the teenager's head, and asked, "Who is your grandfather?" The teenager glanced at the crowd and pointed at an old man with white hair. "He is my grandfather." Qin Feiong looked up at the old man and bowed. "Thank you, elder. Lord Ruler is too polite. This is what we should do as your subjects. Moreover, I'm not the only one who donated blood. In the past, many people in the village went to the western region to donate blood. But don't think too much about it. We all did it willingly. We never expected you to repay us." The old man quickly waved his hand. "There is nothing that should be done. There is only trust and support." Qin Feiong shook his head, looked at the villagers around, and bowed sincerely. "Thank you for your trust and support in me, Qin Feiong." No. How can we accept this bow of yours? Besides, isn't it all because of you that we can live such a comfortable life now? Everyone was filled with fear. Qin Feiong looked at these faces, and the determination in his heart became even stronger. He must protect the living beings of the Black Tortoise realm, and he must not let these lovely people be bullied. Something happened today, so I can only update 2 chapters. Sorry, _. Chapter 40, 318. Lord Ruler, we are just an ordinary family. We don't have anything good to entertain you with, so we'll treat you to a cup of tea to quench your thirst. A white-haired old man, holding a walking stick in one hand and a teacup in the other, staggered over. "Thank you." Qin Feiong hurriedly stepped forward and took the teacup. The old man looked at Qin Feiong expectantly, but he was also a little nervous, because this was a very ordinary tea leaf. He was afraid that Qin Feiong wouldn't like it. Qin Feiong put it to the tip of his nose and smelled it. With his many years of experience in tea, he only needed to smell it to know that this tea was very ordinary. However, not only did he not dislike it, he even drank it with relish. This tea was really bitter and astringent, but, to him, this should be the most delicious tea he had ever drunk in his life. "You don't dislike it, right?" the old man asked nervously. "How could that be?" "It's very fragrant and delicious." Qin Feiong waved his hand and smiled, returning the teacup to the old man. At this moment, what he was drinking was not tea, but everyone's heart for him. The old man was stunned. He took the teacup and looked at the remaining tea in it, his eyes full of suspicion. Very fragrant, very delicious? Impossible. He knew this tea leaf. It was very, very ordinary. Qin Feiong looked at the old man and said with a smile, "Old man, I'll go to Long Qin to have a chat first." Okay. The old man nodded. "Big brother, we'll take you there." A group of youths rushed in front and ran happily towards the stream. The old man looked at Qin Feiong's back and lowered his head to look at the teacup in his hand again. He couldn't help but put it to his mouth and taste the remaining tea. It was very bitter and astringent. It tasted exactly the same as when he drank it in the past. How could this be good? The old man raised his head again and looked at Qin Feiong's back. A trace of a smile appeared on his face as he muttered, The people of Black Tortoise World are really lucky to have such a good ruler. Yes, the surrounding villagers also nodded. Ah, by the stream. Sister Long, Big Brother is looking for you. A group of youths ran to the stream and surrounded Long Chin, giggling. Got it. Long Chin patted the two children's heads and looked up at Qin Feiyang. What's the matter? This. Qin Feiyang glanced at the group of children. Long Chin understood. Looking at the group of children, he waved his hand and said, You guys go play first. All right. Big Brother, I'm telling you, you can't bully Sister Long. If you bully her, we will beat you up. One of them summoned his courage, waved a small fist, and looked at Qin Feiyang fiercely, and said, after she finished speaking, she made a face at Qin Feiyang and ran off into the distance with the other children. How lively! Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. He looked at Long Chin and said, I didn't expect you to be so popular now. Of course. Long Chin smiled proudly. She turned around and sat on the grass. She was barefooted as she swayed in the stream. From behind, he looked like an angel who had fallen into the mortal world. Qin Feiyang also sat on the ground and said with a smile, Why do you stay here all the time? This doesn't seem like your style. Long Chin was stunned. He tilted his head and looked at Qin Feiyang. He asked curiously, Then in your eyes, what kind of style am I? I like to join in the fun. It's okay, I'm just looking for a sense of existence. And Qin Feiyang laughed. Stop. Long Chin's face darkened, and he said angrily, Am I such a person in your eyes? Do you know how to talk? Are you here to make me angry? Ha, I'm just joking. I'm just surprised that you can live in such a place for so many years. Qin Feiyang laughed. Isn't this kind of life good? Long Chin looked at the children who were playing not far away. There was a trace of motherly love on his face. This made Qin Feiyang even more puzzled, because this was too different from Long Chin's original personality. It could be said that they were two completely different personalities. After pondering for a while, Qin Feiyang looked at Long Chin and said with a smile, Let's talk. Aren't we talking now? Long Chin looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and said, I mean, let's talk about you and the white-eyed wolf. Long Chin's expression stiffened slightly, but he recovered in an instant. He pursed his lips and said, What can happen between me and him? What do you think? We're not blind. Whether it's you or the white-eyed wolf, we've seen your abnormalities during this period. It's just that we think that you're all adults and can solve your own problems. So we didn't interrupt. Qin Feiyang said. Long Chin looked slightly flustered. He shook his head and said, There's no problem between us. You little girl. Qin Feiyang rubbed Long Chin's head and said with a smile, You're a classic example of saying one thing and thinking another. Just say it. Don't touch me. Long Chin slapped Qin Feiyang's hand away and glared at him fiercely. But in fact, he quite enjoyed this feeling. This was the care and concern of a brother for his sister. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. He asked, Tell me, what exactly did you and the white-eyed wolf talk about, brother? Long Chin turned to look at Qin Feiyang with an unnatural expression. What's wrong? Am I not worthy of being your brother? Go out and ask around. How many girls in this world are fighting to be my sister? But I don't like ordinary people at all. Qin Feiyang said. Then should I feel honored? Long Chin said with a black face. He had never seen such a cocky man. Of course. Are you kidding? After all, I'm the master of the Black Tortoise World. Isn't it a great honor for you to be my sister? Qin Feiyang laughed proudly. The corner of Long Chin's mouth twitched. He looked back at the stream and cursed in a low voice, shameless. But there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. At most, I'll suffer a little. I won't compete with Long Chin for the position of big brother. In the future, you will reluctantly call me second brother. Qin Feiyang said. Bah. Reluctantly. As if you're so generous. Long Qin was speechless. Haha, looking at Long Qin's reaction. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh. He hesitated for a moment. Long Qin shook his head and said, in fact, he didn't say anything. At that time, he just said to me that we shouldn't quarrel like this in the future. That's a good thing. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Was there anything wrong with the sentence? Long Qin said angrily, don't you understand? He obviously said this to keep a distance from me. But before she finished speaking, she found that Qin Feiyang's expression became a little strange. Immediately after, she realized that she seemed to have said something wrong. In this way, wasn't it equivalent to admitting that she cared about the white-eyed wolf in her heart? Ha! Qin Feiyang looked at the distant mountains and laughed. Don't laugh. Long Qin stared at Qin Feiyang, and his face was a little red. Ha ha! Qin Feiyang laughed even louder. You're still laughing? Long Qin pinched Qin Feiyang's arm with a sense of anger. Okay. I won't laugh. Qin Feiyang was in so much pain that he grimaced in pain. This woman was truly violent. Long Qin snorted coldly, let go of her hand, and looked down at the stream. Qin Feiyang rolled up his sleeve and said angrily, Look, there are bruises. You're too cruel. You want to murder your brother? You deserve it. Long Qin snorted. Yes. I deserve it. Qin Feiyang nodded, then looked at Long Qin and asked, But can you tell me the truth now? Do you have feelings for the white-eyed wolf? When Long Qin heard this, her expression suddenly froze. Looking at the expression on Long Qin's face, Qin Feiyang understood and sighed. In fact, not only me and senior brother, but also your brother is very opposed to your feelings. Why? Long Qin looked at him in confusion. I guess your brother's opposition might be because the white-eyed wolf is very unreliable and usually sloppy. Most importantly, the white-eyed wolf and Fire Dance already have feelings for each other. Long Qin is your brother. He definitely wants you to marry a man who loves you, a man who dotes on you. But it's impossible for the white-eyed wolf, because he already has Fire Dance in his heart. The feelings between him and Fire Dance are obvious to all of us. It's impossible for him to abandon this relationship for anyone else. Of course, there's an even more important factor, and that's your mother. You know your mother's attitude toward us better than we do. Would she let you marry the white-eyed wolf? Absolutely not. As for my and senior brother's opposition, you should know in your heart. Qin Feiyang could not help but sigh at this point. Because of my father? Long Qin asked. Yes. Although your father saved me in the great Qin Empire and helped us when we came to the Divine Kingdom, I've never been able to let go of my prejudice against your father. I'm worried that if I fight with your father one day, the white-eyed wolf will definitely stand by my side. Moreover, you know the white-eyed wolf's temper. If we really fight, he'll definitely be the first to rush to the front. But what about you? If one side is your father, and the other side is the person you love deeply, what will you do? Qin Feiyang asked. Long Qin wanted to say something, but stopped. For a moment, she really did not know what to do. But suddenly, Qin Feiyang changed the topic and a smile crept onto his face. But what? Long Qin looked at him suspiciously. Ever since I reunited with the inner demons and big cousin, I've been thinking about this problem repeatedly when I'm free. Although I do have a strong opinion of your father, I can't be an obstacle between you and the white-eyed wolf because of me. So, if you and the white-eyed wolf really love each other and you really want to be together, I can choose to give in. In short, whether it's your father or your mother, all the previous grudges will be written off. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Really? Long Qin asked with a hint of joy on her face. Yes. However, it won't be easy for you and the white-eyed wolf to be together. After all, there's still Fire Dance. Your matter must be approved by her first. Qin Feiyang smiled. Today, I've been busy in the city for the whole day. The remaining 2 chapters will be released at around 10:30 p.m. End of chapter. Chapter 40, 319. That's right. No woman in this world would be so stupid as to share half of her happiness with another woman. Longqi nodded, but her face was full of worry. Ha! Qin Feiyang laughed again. What are you laughing at? Longqin looked at him in confusion. Didn't you just say that there's nothing between you and the white-eyed wolf? Why are you so worried when facing Fire Dance's problem? Qin Feiyang looked at her teasingly. Longqin's expression froze, and she said angrily, Are you trying to trick me? Ahem. Qin Feiyang coughed and said with a smile, If I didn't do that, would you take the initiative to confess your feelings? However, what I said just now was not false at all. It was the truth. Longqin stared at Qin Feiyang angrily, looking quite cute. That's enough. I'm your brother after all. I won't laugh at you. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Humph. Longqin turned her head away in a fit of pique. Qin Feiyang couldn't help laughing and asked in confusion, Since you really like the white-eyed wolf, why do you keep hiding it? I'm a woman. Do I have to speak first? If I speak first, it means that I'm pursuing him. Wouldn't that make me seem too cheap? We'll talk about it later. In the past, At this point, Longqin lowered her head, and her expression was extremely complicated. Qin Feiyang looked at Longqin for a moment and said with a smile, In the past, although you often bickered with the white-eyed wolf, you didn't realize that you had feelings for him. All these years, you've been alone in this village. As your mentality changes, and as time passes, you'll slowly recognize your own heart. Hearing this, Longqin's cheeks couldn't help but blush. It seemed that he had hit the nail on the head. Do you admire me now? My eyes are as sharp as torches? Qin Feiyang smiled proudly. How shameless. Longqin snorted. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Actually, I also know why you want to stay here. I don't believe it. Longqin shook his head. All right, I'll convince you. After recognizing your own heart, you were very hesitant and helpless. You were very afraid of meeting the white-eyed wolf. Because you're afraid that you won't be able to control your feelings after seeing the white-eyed wolf. Similarly, you don't dare to admit your feelings for the white-eyed wolf because you are too proud. If you confess your feelings first, it will definitely be very embarrassing for you. Furthermore, you're not confident in yourself because you don't know if the white-eyed wolf has feelings for you. There's one more thing. You're also considering your father, mother, and Fire Dance. So, all these years, it's not that you don't want to return to the Devil's Land. It's that you don't dare to return to the Devil's Land and face this. Qin Feiyang said. Longqin was dumbfounded. Was this guy a roundworm in her stomach? He actually got everything right. How is it? Now you admire me very much, right? Qin Feiyang chuckled. TSK. Longqin turned her head again and looked elsewhere. You little girl, this is where you're slow. Think about it. If the white-eyed wolf has no feelings for you, would he deliberately run to you and say those words? Based on my understanding of the white-eyed wolf, if he really has no feelings for you, then no matter how he joke, he won't take it seriously. Qin Feiyang shook his head. When Longqin heard this, she suddenly smiled and asked, You mean the white-eyed wolf actually likes me too? I don't dare to say anything else, but at least he has you in his heart. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. I don't believe it. Longqin shook her head. Why don't you believe it again? Qin Feiyang was helpless. How could he lie about what he said? Longqin snorted coldly. No matter how good your relationship is, it's not to the point of telepathy. How do you know what he thinks in his heart? All right, let's give it a try. Qin Feiyang said. How do we try? Longqin was suspicious. Don't worry about how I try. Anyway, if the white-eyed wolf does have feelings for you, then you have to be prepared to face all obstacles. Because whether it's Fire Dance, your brother, or your parents, you have to face them by yourself. We can't help much. In this matter, if we help, I'm afraid it will be counterproductive. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Personal feelings, especially such a complicated relationship. Even if they have a good relationship with the white-eyed wolf, they can't intervene. Take Longzuin as an example. It's better if he and Madman don't come forward. At most, Longzuin will only make things difficult for the white-eyed wolf. But if he and Madman come forward, Longzuin will definitely turn hostile on the spot. Because in the ancient world, it was Qin Feiyang and Madman who joined forces to defeat Longqin. It was precisely because of this that the dragons were exterminated. The white-eyed wolf was at most an accomplice. Of course, when they came to the Sky Cloud realm, the white-eyed wolf dealt a big blow to the dragons of the Sky Cloud realm. Longqin was silent for a long time and nodded. Let's try. Let's see what tricks you can come up with. Okay, then come back to the Devil's Land with me now. I'm still thinking of going back to the Sky Cloud realm. Qin Feiyang smiled. Why go back to the Sky Cloud realm? Longqin was suspicious. Qin Feiyang briefly explained the situation of the Death God army and the difficulties they were facing now. What, 10 small teams? Longqin was stunned. How many experts of the will of heavens were there in these 10 small teams? So now you know how much pressure I'm facing now. As a sister, you're actually in the mood to play here. Qin Feiyang looked at her with hidden bitterness. Longqin had goosebumps all over his body. Why did he look like a resentful woman? Wait, suddenly. Longqin frowned, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said, if it's just a training target, you don't need to go back to the Sky Cloud realm. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Longqin said, although many of the creatures of the Black Tortoise realm have not stepped into the Dominator realm, we can still train them. We're training them. I've already told Pai Lupi and Theta Wang to create a holy land to train the talents of the Black Tortoise realm, but it will take time. That's true. Longqin nodded. Actually, I'm going back to the Sky Cloud realm to train the people of the Sky Cloud realm for the future. Qin Feiyang sighed. The future? Longqin frowned. Yes, the foundation of the Sky Cloud realm is too weak. Although the 3 major races of the Divine Kingdom have already formed an alliance with us, the future situation is always changing. Can you guarantee that the Divine Kingdom will always be at peace with the Sky Cloud realm? Qin Feiyang said. Longqin said with uncertainty, I think that the Divine King, the monarch, and the sovereign of the human race will not invade the Sky Cloud realm again. They won't. But what about their descendants? After a few years, when they grow old and the successors of the 3 major races start a war again, won't the Sky Cloud realm face a great disaster again? You have to know that we can't stay in the Sky Cloud realm forever. We can't protect the Sky Cloud realm forever. In the future, they will have to rely on themselves. So the only thing that can really stop a war is a balanced strength. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. A balanced strength, Longqin whispered. Yes. As long as the Divine Kingdom and the Sky Cloud realm are equal in strength, even if there is a war in the future, it will just be some small friction. It won't be serious to the point of extermination. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Yes. Longqin smiled and said, You're still the one who thinks far ahead. If you admire me, just say it. Don't be so tactful. Qin Feiyang laughed. I found that your face seems to be comparable to the white-eyed wolf and the others. Longqin's face darkened. Birds of a feather flock together. This sentence was indeed true. Let's go. Follow me back to the Devil's Land and talk to that brat. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Look for that brat? Longqin was taken aback and said suspiciously, Shouldn't we look for the gate of the Divine Kingdom? The gate of the Divine Kingdom is sealed in the land of Source. Can that brat stop? Maybe he has already figured out a way to control the gate of the divine kingdom. Qin Feiyang chuckled. That'd better be the case. After being away for so many years, I really miss the Sky Cloud realm. Long Qin laughed. Missing the Sky Cloud realm is fake. Missing your mother is the real thing. Qin Feiyang smiled. Is it wrong to miss my mother? Long Qin said angrily. Of course it's not wrong. As a child, how can I not miss my parents? Qin Feiyang looked up at the sky. Since he was back in the Sky Cloud realm, he might as well go back to the Great Qin Empire and take a look. The battle with the Central Dynasty was about to erupt. If he didn't go back now, he might not have the chance to go back in the future. This was a sign of lack of confidence. However, there was nothing he could do. The Central Dynasty was too strong. He had to be prepared to die in battle. If he could use his death to overthrow the Central Dynasty's rule and get rid of the Divine Kingdom's ruler in exchange for peace for the Divine Kingdom, the Sky Cloud realm, the Nether King's Hell, and even the ancient world, Great Qin, and the Forgotten Continent, it would be a worthy death. We can't lose the battle with the Central Dynasty and the Divine Kingdom's ruler. If we lose, the Central Dynasty and the Divine Kingdom's ruler will definitely take revenge. At that time, not only the Divine Kingdom, but the Sky Cloud realm and all the continents below it will be destroyed. Long Qin muttered in a low voice. She was also worried. Qin Feiyang nodded. There was no fear or sorrow. He was very calm. After comprehending the law of life and death, he had already seen through life and death. After saying goodbye to the villagers, the two returned to the Devil's Land. The villagers were very reluctant. This was especially true for the children in the village. They missed Long Qin dearly. It could be seen how popular Long Qin was in the village. However, Long Qin wasn't an ordinary person. Although she was a woman, she had her own responsibilities. She couldn't stay idle forever. Her experiences in the village over the years would become a beautiful memory in her future life. Little brat, come out for a moment. I have something to discuss with you. Tea garden. Qin Feiyang looked up at the sky and shouted. Long Qin went to visit Long Qin. After all, she hadn't returned to the Devil's Land for so many years, so she naturally wanted to report to her big brother that she was safe. End of chapter. Chapter 40, 320. Whoosh! After a while, Little Wimp descended from the sky and landed in the tea garden. What took you so long? Qin Feiyang frowned. Do you have a problem with that? Little Wimp sat in front of Qin Feiyang like an old man, scowling at Qin Feiyang and asking. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched and said, helplessly, how would I dare? Can you control the gate of the Divine Kingdom now? Although he was the ruler of the Black Tortoise world in name, the real ruler of the Black Tortoise world should be this Little Wimp, because in front of this Little Wimp, he didn't have the initiative. So it's because of this. Little Wimp nodded and said, Do you want to hear the good news or the bad news? Qin Feiyang was stunned. What did he mean? Little Wimp waved his hand impatiently and said, Answer me first. Then let's hear the good news first. Qin Feiyang hesitated and said, Little Wimp said, The good news is that I have control of the gate of the Divine Kingdom now. What? Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up. Previously, he told Long Qin that this Little Wimp might have figured out a way to control the gate of the Divine Kingdom, but he didn't expect that he had already controlled the gate of the Divine Kingdom now. This was really great news. Calm down, calm down. Little Wimp waved his hand and signaled Qin Feiyang to sit down. Qin Feiyang returned to the stone bench and asked excitedly, How did you do it? Simple. Using the origin energy of the Black Tortoise world, I destroyed it bit by bit until it was about to be destroyed. Then I finally compromised. Little Wimp grinned, as if he had just done something very easy. Destruction of both body and soul? Qin Feiyang was stunned and frowned. It really has intelligence. Little Wimp said, The gate of the divine kingdom is actually a divine weapon, but this divine weapon is a little high level. Divine weapon? What level? Qin Feiyang was bewildered. Little Wimp said, Pinnacle sovereign divine weapon. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up and said in astonishment, Are you sure? It's a peak grade dominator divine weapon? You're making a fuss over nothing. Are you still a talent that I nurtured? Little Wimp's face was filled with disdain. What the hell? Am I a talent that you nurtured? You must be dreaming. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. How dare he say that? He really wanted Long Qin to see who was the thick-skinned one. If not for me, would you have obtained the Black Tortoise world? If it weren't for my guidance all these years, would you have allowed the Black Tortoise world to grow so quickly? Young man, you can't forget your roots. Forgetting your roots will lead to retribution. Little Wimp said meaningfully, Get lost. Qin Feiyang glared at him in annoyance and returned to the stone chair. If the door of the divine kingdom is really a peak grade dominator divine weapon, why did it compromise with me so easily back in the sky cloud realm? Also, when we broke into the divine kingdom, if it was really a peak grade dominator divine weapon, it wouldn't have been sealed by us so easily. You know how to ask questions. That means that you have some brains. Little Wimp nodded like an old man. Will you die if you don't pretend? Qin Feiyang's veins were bulging. He was clearly a little wimp who hadn't even grown hair yet. Yet he was pretending to be deep all day long. What did you say? Say it again. Let me tell you, if you continue to be so rude, I will return to the origin power now. See who will beg who? Little Wimp said angrily. Okay. Old senior, I was wrong. I apologize to you. Qin Feiyang was helpless to the extreme. What kind of sin did he commit in his previous life? Why did he always meet such trash? Call me Big Brother. Little Wimp pushed his luck and said with a cold face, Okay, Big Brother. Qin Feiyang nodded. He felt powerless in his heart. That's more like it. Little Wimp smiled proudly and explained, The gate of the divine kingdom is a bit special. Its hardness is comparable to a peak grade dominator divine weapon, but it doesn't have any destructive power. It is purely a teleportation gate. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang came to a realization and said with a smile, No wonder back then in the Void Land, Senior Brother, White-Eyed Wolf, Long Chun, and Long Qin joined forces and still couldn't break the gate of the divine kingdom. According to the weapon spirit, when the gate of the divine kingdom was being refined, the ruler of the divine kingdom had been using the origin power to strengthen the gate of the divine kingdom as soon as possible. In other words, the reason why the gate of the divine kingdom is so hard is because of the constant tempering of the origin power. However, although it doesn't have any destructive power, it is difficult to suppress with just its hardness. Back then, in order to suppress it, I almost used up all the origin power of the Black Tortoise realm. Little Wimp said, Then now will it listen to you obediently? Qin Feiyang was a little worried. The gate of the divine kingdom might betray them as soon as they returned to the sky cloud realm. If the ruler of the divine kingdom is here, it's hard to say. But now it doesn't have the guts. Little Wimp bared his teeth. Why do you say that? Qin Feiyang was curious. Because it has already made a blood oath. If the ruler of the divine kingdom is here, he can help it resist the blood oath. But now, the ruler of the divine kingdom is in hell. If it violates the oath when the blood oath descends, it will only end up with its soul destroyed. Little Wimp said, That's good. Qin Feiyang nodded. This was really good news. Suddenly, his expression froze, and he asked, Then, can the gate of the divine kingdom teleport to other places? What places? Little Wimp looked at him suspiciously. For example, directly teleporting from the divine kingdom to Great Qin or the ancient world. Qin Feiyang said, No, The Gate of the Divine Kingdom is a teleportation gate specially created by the ruler of the Divine Kingdom for the Sky Cloud Realm and the Divine Kingdom. Little Wimp shook his head. Then it has no value. Only its hardness is comparable to a pinnacle sovereign divine weapon. But it is not a pinnacle sovereign divine weapon at all. No, it can't even be considered a sovereign divine weapon. Qin Feiyang immediately lost interest. Not stupid, you know how to think. Little Wimp chuckled. A row of black lines appeared on Qin Feiyang's forehead. He asked, "Then, what is the bad news you mentioned?" "Bad news!" Little Wimp wanted to say something, but hesitated, looking extremely heavy. Qin Feiyang's heart also jumped to his throat. Could it be that the Gate of the Divine Kingdom had revealed some earth-shattering news to Little Wimp? And this news was related to the ruler of the Divine Kingdom? Sigh. Suddenly, Little Wimp let out a long sigh, looked at Qin Feiyang but suddenly grinned and said, "The bad news is that there is no news." "The bad news is that there is no news? What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang didn't know how to react to this sudden turn of events. "You are indeed a big fool. No news means that there is no bad news. You don't even understand this. Haha, what an idiot. Might as well call you Big Fool from now on." Little Wimp laughed out loud. No bad news? Qin Feiyang was stunned, and then glared at Little Wimp. At this time, he still had the mood to tease him? Didn't he know what the current situation was? He was simply a bastard. No, using the word bastard to describe him was more appropriate. Little Wimp held back his laughter and said, "Big fool, why are you asking about the Gate of the Divine Kingdom?" Qin Feiyang said angrily, "Asking about the Gate of the Divine Kingdom, of course, is to prepare to return to the Sky Cloud Realm. You can't even think of this, and you still have the face to call me a big fool?" Little Wimp's expression froze, and he said angrily, "You're still arrogant, aren't you? Just you wait. I'll go destroy the Gate of the Divine Kingdom right now. Let's see how you'll return to the Sky Cloud Realm." Don't. Qin Feiyang hurriedly got up and pulled Little Wimp and said with a bitter face, "I'm convinced, okay? Please don't torment me anymore. Call me Big Brother." Little Wimp raised his eyebrows. Big Brother. Qin Feiyang had no dignity as he submitted to Little Wimp's obscene might. "Are you a big fool?" Little Wimp asked. "You." Qin Feiyang was furious. "What am I? Tell me." Little Wimp chuckled, the threat in his eyes undisguised. "Okay, I am." Qin Feiyang endured the grievance in his stomach and nodded. "That's a good boy." Little Wimp laughed out loud again and flew towards the sky with great pride. "What kind of ruler am I?" Qin Feiyang was depressed to the extreme. He couldn't even freely enter and exit the land of origin, so what kind of ruler was he? Wasn't this a joke? Puff! At this time, not far away, there was a snicker. Qin Feiyang looked over and saw Long Qin standing under a tea tree. Her face was already red from holding back her anger. "What are you laughing at?" Qin Feiyang stared at him in dissatisfaction. As Long Qin walked over, he said, "You're really sullen as a ruler." "Who says so?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Clang! Before his voice faded, accompanied by a loud sound, a divine gate descended from the sky and landed above the tea garden. It was the Gate of the Divine Kingdom. What's going on? This seems to be the aura of the Gate of the Divine Kingdom. Could it be that it broke the seal and wants to leave the Black Tortoise realm? Whoosh! Everyone was familiar with the aura of the Gate of the Divine Kingdom. Immediately, everyone woke up from their seclusion and rushed to the tea garden, their faces gloomy to the extreme. What's going on? Qin Feiyang and Long Qin looked at this scene in astonishment. Even Long Chen, as well as the white-eyed wolf and lunatic who were fooling around somewhere, ran back. "Young master, are you okay? Qin, are you okay?" Everyone rushed over and immediately surrounded Qin Feiyang and Long Qin. their faces full of concern. "I'm fine, what's wrong with you?" Long Qin looked at Long Qin and the others suspiciously. Long Qin stared at the gate of the Divine Kingdom and said in a deep voice, "Isn't this the gate of the Divine Kingdom?" It was rare to see his face so solemn. "Yes, this is the gate of the Divine Kingdom. But this gate of the Divine Kingdom has been controlled by that little brat and can't pose a threat to us." Long Qin said, "What? It has been controlled by that little brat?" The group of people looked at Qin Feiyang and Long Qin in astonishment. Were they making a fuss over nothing? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "It has indeed been controlled by that little brat. Now I called it out to prepare to return to the Sky Cloud realm." Everyone looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They thought something big was going to happen. It turned out to be a false alarm. "Return to the Sky Cloud realm?" Dong Xingyang murmured and smiled. "All right." But there was a hidden meaning in his words. Qin Feiyang was keenly aware of the abnormality and turned to look at Dong Xingyang suspiciously. However, Dong Xingyang didn't explain anything. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "If you can, make a trip back to the Great Qin. After all, the war is coming. Don't leave any regrets." Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. Why did these words have a hidden meaning? Could it be that Dong Xingyang had seen his future? Would he really die in the Divine Kingdom in the end? "When you return to the Great Qin, inform me. I also have concerns about the Forgotten Continent." Dong Xingyang still didn't explain anything. He looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled, then turned and left. Why is this guy a little strange today? The white-eyed wolf and the madman looked at Dong Xingyang suspiciously. It is a little strange. The demon ancestor, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing also nodded and muttered. End of chapter. Chapter 40, 3:21. Qin Feiyang did not look for Dong Xingyang in private, because even if he went to look for Dong Xingyang would only tell him that the secrets of heaven could not be revealed. Are we really going back to the Great Qin? The mermaid princess turned to look at Qin Feiyang with anticipation in her eyes. Let's go back and take a look. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. He did not believe that Dong Xingyang would say these words for no reason. Don't leave any regrets. This might be a hint. Hearing this, a trace of joy immediately appeared in the mermaid princess' eyes. She turned to look at Fire Dance and Zhuo Xiaoxian and said with a smile, "Come with us." "Sure." Zhuo Xiaoxian giggled. She had long been curious about the Great Qin. "You're going to the Great Qin to join in the fun? If you want to go back, you'll go back to the ancient realm with me." The madman wrapped his arm around Zhuo Xiaoxian's slender waist and said with the attitude of a domineering CEO, "Bah, I haven't married you yet." Zhuo Xiaoxian's cheeks turned red. "We're just short of a wedding." The madman bared his teeth. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Zhuo Xiaoxian grabbed the madman's arm and glared at him. How dare he say anything? Didn't he see that there were so many people present? "Wait, we're just short of a wedding? What do you mean?" The white-eyed wolf looked at the two of them suspiciously. "Nothing." Zhuo Xiaoxian hurriedly waved her hand. Explaining was equivalent to covering up. The white-eyed wolf looked at the two of them strangely and asked, "Don't tell me you've already secretly consummated your marriage behind our backs." Everyone was stunned when they heard this. No. Zhuo Xiaoxian hurriedly waved her hand. The madman said with a dark face, "Damn wolf cub, I'm such a person. Don't ruin my reputation here." "Huh. Little madman. I didn't realize that you're the one who's the most boring and coquettish." The white-eyed wolf laughed loudly. Even with the madman's thick skin, his old face could not help but turn red. Could he be blamed for this? A man and a woman alone in the same room every day. As a hot-blooded man, how could he remain indifferent? There was bound to be a time when he couldn't control himself. The white-eyed wolf walked up to Fire Dance and bared his teeth. Sister Phoenix, shouldn't we hurry up as well? Move aside. Fire Dance's cheeks couldn't help but turn red as she glared at him angrily. Before you speak, can you pay attention to the situation first? Long Qin's eyes dimmed as he watched the two flirt with each other. Qin Feiyang saw it all and smiled. Go do what you need to do. I still have some things to tell the monarch and the others. Everyone dispersed one after another. Only the madman, the white-eyed wolf, and Long Qin remained. The madman glanced at Long Qin and grinned. How did you come back? You think I want to come back? It was Qin Feiyang who personally invited me back. Long Qin said proudly as he looked at Madman. Yo, yo, yo. You're really something to be personally invited by old Qin. The madman laughed strangely as he looked at the silent white-eyed wolf and joked. Brother Wolf, weren't you the one who made the most noise? Why aren't you saying anything now? You talk too much. The white-eyed wolf glared at him fiercely. Facing Long Qin, who was standing opposite him, he seemed to be a little afraid to look at him. The madman laughed and looked at Qin Feiyang. Old Qin, the inner demons, and Lu Jiajin definitely want to go back. Should we find a way to inform them? They're in the Central Dynasty. How can we inform them? Qin Feiyang shook his head. That's true. The origin energy isolates the Central Dynasty and the 4 great continents. What a headache. The madman nodded. Wait, we can go find that young man. Isn't his origin energy able to defeat the origin energy of the Divine Kingdom? The white-eyed wolf's eyes lit up. Where can we find him? Moreover, even if we find him, he may not do so. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, and his eyes suddenly became extremely firm. He looked at the two and said, We must go to the Central Dynasty, but before we go, we must make the best arrangements. All right, the two nodded. Returning to the Sky Cloud Realm to train the people of the Sky Cloud Realm could be considered as preparing for a rainy day and cultivating a reserve army for the future. In the future, in the Divine Kingdom, if they couldn't defeat the Central Dynasty, at least they would have reinforcements. Unlike now, once they fell, everything would be over. Qin Feiyang took out the Divine Sound Transmission Stone. Buzz! Soon, a shadow appeared. It was the monarch. What's wrong? The monarch looked at them and chuckled. Qin Feiyang said truthfully, We're going back to the Sky Cloud Realm. Back to the Sky Cloud Realm? The monarch was slightly taken aback and hurriedly said, Why so sudden? Did something big happen in the Sky Cloud Realm? Not really. After leaving for so long, we just want to go back and take a look. On the way back to the great Qin Empire to see our family, Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. So that's how it is. The monarch nodded in realization. As long as nothing big happened, it was fine. But suddenly, the monarch's spirit shook as he stared at Qin Feiyang and asked, You just said that you want to go back to the great Qin Empire? Qin Feiyang nodded. Go back to the great Qin Empire, the monarch murmured, and suddenly seemed to have made a decision. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Wait for me first. I'll go and explain to second brother. Then I'll go with you to the great Qin Empire. You're going too? Qin Feiyang and the others were stunned. The monarch said angrily, My precious daughter is imprisoned by you in the great Qin Empire. I must go and take a look. Cough, cough. How is this imprisonment? We are clearly protecting her. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Come on. Anyway, I must go. Wait for me, the monarch said with a dark face. Wait a moment. If you go with us to the great Qin Empire, what if the people of the Central Dynasty come and can't find you? How are you going to explain it to them? Qin Feiyang hurriedly asked. Why didn't he realize that the monarch was also a person who liked to join in the fun? That's easy. When the time comes, just say that I'm in seclusion. I don't believe that they can turn the 4 great continents upside down. Anyway, if I don't see you when I get to the Void Land later, I will definitely settle the score with you." After saying that, the monarch was about to turn off the voice transmission stone. "Wait." Qin Feiyang hurriedly stopped the monarch and said, "Since you're going to the great Qin Empire, help me bring some divine wine while you're at it." Divine wine? The monarch was stunned. The white-eyed wolf rolled his eyes and bared his teeth. "Little Qin Zi, you're really good. You know that I like this kind of wine. Don't think too much. I prepared it for you." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and looked at the monarch with a smile. "The more, the better. Thank you. Okay." The monarch nodded and hurriedly turned off the voice transmission stone. "Little Qin Zi, I must have been blind to be your brother." The white-eyed wolf glared at Qin Feiyang angrily. "Haven't you drunk enough divine wine in the divine kingdom these days?" Qin Feiyang's face darkened. He ignored the white-eyed wolf and sent a message to the divine king and Jizun one after another to tell them about the matter. The two were surprised to hear that. However, when they heard Qin Feiyang say that he would be back soon, the two of them relaxed. They were afraid that Qin Feiyang would not come back. If that was the case, they would have to clean up the mess in the divine kingdom. They had no confidence in facing the central dynasty at all. After explaining everything, Qin Feiyang and the other three left the Black Tortoise Realm, opened the space-time tunnel, and entered the Void Land. The Void Land. Very few people had set foot in this place in the first place. After the battle between Qin Feiyang's group and the monarch's group, not even a shadow could be seen here. The four stood in the center of the Void Land and waited silently. "Are we really going to wait for him?" Long Qin frowned. "What else can we do?" Qin Feiyang said helplessly. "You have to know how much the creatures of the Sky Cloud Realm hate him. If we take him to the Sky Cloud Realm, it will be difficult to clean up the mess." Long Qin was worried. The situation was the same as in the Divine Kingdom. The creatures of the Sky Cloud Realm disliked the monarch as much as the creatures of the Divine Kingdom disliked the monarch. "I know, but now we have formed an alliance. The grudge between the Sky Cloud Realm and the Divine Kingdom should be settled." Qin Feiyang said, "With the hatred the Sky Cloud Realm has for the Divine Kingdom, it won't be easy to resolve this grudge. I'm afraid it will be difficult for the Blood Ancestor, Feather Emperor, and the Little Rabbit to pass this hurdle. Especially the Little Rabbit, the beast god of the Sky Cloud Realm. Back then it died in the hands of the monarch. Although you are sworn brothers now, I'm afraid it will fall out with you on the spot." As soon as Long Qin said this, Qin Feiyang, the madman, and the white-eyed wolf couldn't help but frown. It was indeed so. If they went back and told the Feather Emperor and the others about this, it might be counterproductive. How about this? Let the monarch stay in the Black Tortoise Realm first. Don't let him show up in the Sky Cloud Realm. As for personal grudges, let's wait until the Central Dynasty is overthrown and the ruler of the Divine Kingdom is eradicated. The madman suggested. "I agree. At this time, let's not complicate things." The white-eyed wolf nodded. "That's the only way." Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. It would be very difficult for the people of the Divine Kingdom to accept them, but it would be equally difficult for the people of the Sky Cloud Realm to accept the monarch and the others. This was the result of the grudges of the past. The grudges had accumulated too deep. It would take a long time to wipe them all out. After a while, a figure tore through the air like lightning. Who else could it be but the monarch? "At least you know your place." The monarch landed in front of the four and chuckled. He was really afraid that Qin Feiyang and the others would ignore him and directly return to the Sky Cloud Realm. "You want to go to Great Qin so much?" The madman was suspicious. "My precious daughter is in Great Qin. What do you think?" The monarch stared at him. Since the first invasion of the Sky Cloud Realm, he had been separated from Ji Tianyue. He didn't know how many years had passed, but he missed her day and night. Now that he could finally go to Great Qin and see the daughter he missed so much, how could he miss this opportunity? You can go, but you can't appear in the Sky Cloud realm, Qin Feiyang said. Why? The monarch frowned. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Aren't you asking the obvious? With the hatred of the Sky Cloud realm for you, if they see you appear in the Sky Cloud realm again, won't they immediately swarm you? Just them? There was a trace of disdain on the monarch's face. Yes, with their strength, you are definitely not afraid. But you have to consider our situation. You are the enemy of the Sky Cloud realm. When they see us standing together with your enemy, won't they drown us with their saliva? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. This, the monarch frowned, pondered for a moment, and nodded. All right, I'll give you brats some face. He really disdained this kind of sneaky behavior. Moreover, with his status and strength, it was a shame to do such a thing. However, for the sake of the overall situation, in order to see his daughter, he chose to endure. End of this chapter. Chapter 43:22. Then I'll have to trouble you to have some tea in the tea garden. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the monarch to the Devil's Land. Then he took out the gate of the Divine Kingdom. Clang! With a loud sound, the gate of the Divine Kingdom flashed and opened quickly, connecting to the gate of the Divine Kingdom in the Sky Cloud realm, land of the buried gods. The core area. 2 young men sat cross-legged on a mountain peak. On the mountain peak, there was the aura of a time array. The aura of the two was not weak. They were Yun Ziang and the masked Azura. As usual, the masked Azura wore a black mask on his face and exuded a cold aura. All these years, the two had been guarding the land of the buried gods, just in case, because in their eyes, the Divine Kingdom was still their great enemy and could come to the Sky Cloud realm again at any time. Clang! Suddenly, a deafening sound rang out. The two suddenly opened their eyes and looked up at the gate of the Divine Kingdom. Their eyes flashed coldly. The Divine Kingdom really came again. Could it be that the Sky Cloud realm that had finally calmed down was going to fall into war again? Their hearts were extremely nervous. Without Qin Feiyang and the others, how could the Sky Cloud realm face the army of the Divine Kingdom? Time passed little by little. Under their nervous gazes, for figures came out of the gate of the Divine Kingdom one after another. Yun Ziang and the masked Azura were stunned. These 4 people, weren't they Qin Feiyang, the madman, the white-eyed wolf, and Long Qin? The two looked at each other in disbelief. They rubbed their eyes hard and looked up again. The 4 people standing in the sky looked the same. It was really them. Over the years, not only Yun Ziang and the masked Azura, but even the Feather Emperor and the others thought that Qin Feiyang and the others broke into the Divine Kingdom purely to seek their own deaths. So they had been worried, but they didn't expect that these people not only came back alive, but they were also full of energy. Obviously, their days in the Divine Kingdom were pretty good. From the looks of it, you don't seem too happy to see us come back alive? Qin Feiyang and the other 3 took a step forward and landed on the mountain peak. The white-eyed wolf looked at Yun Ziang and the masked Azura and grinned. No, no! The 2 of them regained their senses and hurriedly waved their hands. All these years, they had been waiting for this moment. How could he not be happy? How have you been all these years? Looking at these 2 comrades who had gone through fire and water together, Qin Feiyang also showed a sincere smile on his face. Yes, we're all fine. Yun Ziang nodded and asked happily, what about you guys? Is everything going well in the Divine Kingdom? It's all right. Qin Feiyang smiled. He didn't elaborate. This was because it was best not to speak of the Death God Army situation to prevent unnecessary panic. That's good. No matter what, it's fine as long as I come back alive. Welcome. Yun Ziang opened his arms and gave Qin Feiyang a bear hug. He was even crying tears of joy. You've worked hard. Qin Feiyang patted Yun Xiang's back. Yun Xiang and the Master Jura looked at each other and shook their heads. What's there to work hard for? At most, we're guarding the land of buried gods. That's right. But you guys are different. You broke into the Divine Kingdom alone and personally faced the countless strong people of the Divine Kingdom. Although you said it casually before, Junior Brother and I are not stupid. We can imagine how you guys have survived all these years. The masked Jura said. His eyes were also a little wet. Qin Feiyang and the other three looked at each other. It was really a happy thing to be able to come back alive and see these old friends. However, you guys are really something. Sneaking into the Divine Kingdom without even saying a word. When we reacted and prepared to go to the Divine Kingdom, we found that the door to the Divine Kingdom had already closed. Yun Xiang stared at them angrily. Don't you guys need to guard the Sky Cloud Realm? If we all go to the Divine Kingdom, who will stabilize the order of the Sky Cloud Realm? Qin Feiyang laughed. Come on. I think you guys are afraid that we will drag you down. Yun Xiang pursed his lips. Haha, it's good that you know. Why say it out loud and bring shame to yourself? The white-eyed wolf laughed. You, Yun Xiang glared the white-eyed wolf and said helplessly, after so many years, you still haven't changed at all. Are you still Brother Wolf after changing? The white-eyed wolf bared his teeth. That's true. Yun Xiang was stunned and nodded with a helpless smile. Then he looked at the four of them and said, Anyway, as long as you don't make us go to the Divine Kingdom to collect your corpses, it's better than anything. Don't jinx it. Let me tell you, we are doing well in the Divine Kingdom. You won't believe it, but the Divine Kingdom is about to be wiped out by us. The white-eyed wolf smiled proudly. Really? Yun Xiang and the masked Jura were surprised. How can it be fake? This time we came back to give ourselves a holiday, understand? The white-eyed wolf looked at the two of them proudly. A vacation? The two of them looked at each other. You must be kidding. Qin Feiyang and the other's strength and means were indeed very strong, but they were not strong to such an extent. One had to know. Back then, the monarch, Heavenly Lord Ji, the Divine King, and the supreme of the human race came to the Sky Cloud Realm. If it weren't for the appearance of the small beast and the ice dragon, the Sky Cloud Realm would have been finished. Even now, when they recalled the terrifying strength that the monarch and the others showed back then, they couldn't help but be frightened, especially the ruler of the Divine Kingdom. He was simply an invincible existence. The white-eyed wolf's words are indeed a bit exaggerated. However, the situation in the Divine Kingdom is indeed not as serious as you think. It is basically under control. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them and smiled. Impressive. The two of them gave him a thumbs up. Since even Qin Feiyang said so, it must be true. Let's go, let's go. Let's go to Sky Cloud Island now. Feather Emperor, Shuezu, and Little Rabbit will be happier than us when they hear the news of your return, because they are the ones who are most worried about you all these years. Yun Xiang said with a smile. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but think of Shuezu, Feather Emperor, and Little Rabbit. Thinking of their upcoming reunion, he was still a little excited. Wait a moment. The white-eyed wolf looked up at the gate of the Divine Kingdom and frowned. Although the gate of the Divine Kingdom in the Divine Kingdom has already made a blood oath, the gate of the Divine Kingdom in the Sky Cloud Realm is considered an independent existence. Will it be bound by the blood oath? Qin Feiyang said. Although there are two gates of the Divine Kingdom, their consciousness is not independent. As long as you control one, you can control both. You mean, as long as the wrath of heaven descends, the two gates of the Divine Kingdom won't be able to escape? The white-eyed wolf asked. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. That's good. Don't let the gate of the Divine Kingdom here cause any trouble. The white-eyed wolf breathed a sigh of relief. What do you mean? Control the gate of the divine kingdom. Yun Ziang and the Master Jura looked at the four of them in surprise. This was truly a shocking revelation. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "It's a long story. We'll talk about it when we see Xue Zhu and the others." Okay. The two nodded. Long Qin said, "You guys go. I'll go back to the dragon nest." Qin Feiyong was slightly surprised. He turned to Long Qin and nodded with a smile. "Okay, call your brother out too." With a wave of his hand, Long Qin appeared. Long Qin looked around and then at the gate of the divine kingdom. He looked at Yun Ziang and the Master Jura and cupped his hands and smiled. "Long time no see, both of you. How have you been?" Yun Ziang smiled and said, "Brother Long is getting more and more energetic. It seems that you've had a good time in the Sky Cloud realm." "It's okay. Now I'm anxious to go home. We'll catch up later." Long Qin said. "Okay." The two nodded. The brother and sister opened a space-time passage and quickly left. The brother and sister's attitude towards us seems to be different from before, especially Long Qin. The change is the biggest. Yun Ziang looked at the brother and sister's back and muttered, "People change." Qin Feiyong smiled and opened a space-time passage. The Master Jura looked at them and said, "You guys go. I still have to keep an eye on the gate of the divine kingdom." "No need." The white-eyed wolf waved his hand. "No, just in case, it's best to keep an eye on it." The Master Jura shook his head. "Why are you so stubborn?" The white-eyed wolf said helplessly, "Just keep an eye on it." Qin Feiyong smiled and looked at the masked Azura. "Then I'll have to trouble you." "No problem." The masked Azura waved his hand. "Then let's go." The four stepped into the space-time passage one after another. The masked Azura looked at the backs of Qin Feiyong, the madman, and the white-eyed wolf and muttered, "Although they are restraining their aura, I can still feel a particularly strong sense of crisis. It seems that these three guys have improved a lot in the divine kingdom over the years." Sky Cloud Island. It was located in the center of the Sky Cloud Sea. It was also the center of the entire Sky Cloud realm. This was the holy land of the Sky Cloud realm. Especially now, because of the existence of the heavenly cloud divine treasure, the creatures of the Sky Cloud realm yearned for this place even more. But there was no other way. No matter how much they yearned for it, they could only stare. Because only when the heavenly cloud divine treasure was opened, the little rabbit would allow everyone to come here. If they dared to come here, they would never be merciful. At this time, at the top of the mountain, in the pavilion by the cliff, the Feather Emperor, the little rabbit, and the Blood Ancestor were sitting around the table. The little rabbit was holding a wine jar and leaning on the stool like a master. The Blood Ancestor and the Feather Emperor were drinking tea. Their days were quite comfortable. "Hey!" Suddenly, the little rabbit shook the wine jar in his hand and said angrily, "Why can't I drink it? It's gone after a few sips." The Blood Ancestor's face was dark and speechless. "You drink every day. No matter how much peerless divine wine I prepare for you, it won't be enough for you. What does a damn old man like you know? For someone like Uncle Rabbit, if I don't drink for a day, my heart will feel uncomfortable." The little rabbit stared at him and looked at the sky powerlessly. "When will old three come back? I really miss him. Bastard, you miss his divine wine." The Feather Emperor shook his head and laughed. "Why are you so talkative? No one will think you're mute if you don't talk." The little rabbit suddenly frowned. All these years he had been drinking divine wine, and his appetite had long been developed. Now, when ordinary wine was placed in front of him, he didn't have the slightest appetite. End of this chapter. Chapter 43:23. Buzz. Suddenly, in the sky above the sea, a space-time passage appeared. The little rabbit looked up and frowned. Who dares to barge into Sky Cloud Island without permission? The Feather Emperor and the Blood Ancestor also put down their teacups and looked up suspiciously. A figure appeared first. It was Yun Ziang. So it's this kid. The Feather Emperor and the Blood Ancestor smiled at each other, but then the smiles on their faces froze, and they stared at the gate of the divine kingdom. After Yun Ziang, 3 more figures walked out of the space-time passage. The little rabbit, suddenly stood up, and the wine jar in her hand fell and shattered into pieces. But even so, the Feather Emperor and the Blood Ancestor didn't seem to have heard it. Their eyes were fixed on the 3 people behind Yun Ziang. They're still so familiar. The space-time passage gradually disappeared. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 stood in the sky and scanned the surrounding sea and islands. After so many years, everything here was still the same as before. Not much had changed. Returning to this place felt like returning to his own home. Second brother, third brother, Uncle Rabbit isn't dreaming, right? Is it really, you guys? Suddenly, the little rabbit roared and rushed over excitedly. Big brother. Qin Feiyang and Madman looked up, and a smile crept onto their faces. It really is you too. I really missed you. The little rabbit ran over and excitedly jumped around on Qin Feiyang and Madman's heads. In just a short while, the top of their heads became a messy chicken nest. Big brother, you're too enthusiastic. We can't stand it. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Do you really think he misses you? He's missing your divine brew because the divine brew you gave him back then is almost finished. The Feather Emperor and the Blood Ancestor walked over side by side. Their eyes were filled with tears. After countless days and nights of waiting, these brats had finally returned. Moreover, they had returned unscathed. Big brother, stop messing around. Qin Feiyang grabbed the little rabbit and threw it to the side. Then he hurriedly walked in front of Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor. Looking at these 2 familiar faces, he felt extremely guilty. I've made you worry all these years. You knew we would be worried. I know. Why didn't you tell us when you left? Feather Emperor said angrily with a cold face. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. You need to be taught a lesson. The Feather Emperor gently patted Qin Feiyang's head. Although he looked very angry, his eyebrows were full of concern and joy. Qin Feiyang rubbed his head and laughed dryly. What else could he say? Not to mention a light pat, even if he was beaten up fiercely, he could only endure it because the person in front of him was his ancestor. It's good that you're back. The Blood Ancestor nodded. He looked behind him and frowned. Where is Li Feng? And what about Tianyu? Long Tianyu was the Blood Ancestor's biological child. Li Feng was also a disciple of the Blood Ancestor. He was naturally very concerned. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly and was about to speak. The white-eyed wolf suddenly pushed Qin Feiyang away and looked at the Blood Ancestor with a sad expression. We originally discussed that we should hide this matter from you, but I thought about it carefully. One of them is your child, and the other is your disciple. I feel that you have the right to know. Qin Feiyang and the mad scientist looked at each other. What was this damn wolf up to? However, the Blood Ancestor, the Feather Emperor, and Yun Ziang looked at the white-eyed wolf and couldn't help but feel their hearts sink. Li Feng and Long Tianyu. No, he is your child. He should be called Nangong Tianyu. The 2 of them have already died in battle in the divine kingdom. The white-eyed wolf said with a sad expression. What? The Blood Ancestor's body swayed, and he couldn't help but feel dizzy. The Feather Emperor hurriedly reached out to support the Blood Ancestor. Yun Ziang's expression also changed, and he couldn't help but clench his fists. Little Rabbit couldn't help but frown. I'm sorry. It's all because we didn't take good care of them. We couldn't even bring back a piece of their body. The white-eyed wolf lowered his head with a face full of self-blame. Qin Feiyang and the mad scientist's lips twitched violently. This was indeed a wicked thing. They finally reunited, but he made such a big joke. My condolences. But don't worry, we have already cut the people who killed them into pieces and scattered their ashes. It's just that no one will take care of you in the future. But don't be afraid. As Li Feng's brothers, little Qin Zi and I will definitely take good care of you. We won't let you die alone. We're also planning to find you a partner. With someone to talk to, you won't be so lonely. The white-eyed wolf's words made the blood ancestor's face turn pale. He didn't even have time to reunite with Nan Gong Tianyu, and he was already separated by life and death? He could be considered as having a son at an old age. But now he was an old man who had to send off his own son. Why? He roared at the sky, his heart and lungs torn. F***CK, this joke seems to have gone too far. The white-eyed wolf's pupils constricted. He coughed dryly and said, Little Qin Zi, little lunatic, you too comfort me. I'm going to see my old friends. After saying that, he opened a space-time tunnel and slipped away without looking back. Qin Feiyang and the mad scientist's lips twitched. He left after causing such a big mess and left them to deal with the aftermath? Was this something a human could do? Cough, cough. Ancestor, please wait. The white-eyed wolf was just joking with you. Li Feng and Tianyu are both in seclusion in the Black Tortoise world. They're still alive, Qin Feiyang said. Huh. The Feather Emperor, Bunny, and Yun Xiang raised their heads and looked at Qin Feiyang. The blood ancestor was also stunned. Then he hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyang as if he was grasping at a life-saving straw. It's true. I'll get them to come out later. Qin Feiyang smiled. Is it really a joke? The Feather Emperor asked. Yes. It's not like you don't know the white-eyed wolf's personality. How many words from his mouth can be true? Qin Feiyang was helpless. Wolf cub, you bastard. The blood ancestor was instantly furious, but he couldn't find the white-eyed wolf anywhere. He said angrily, Where is he? Previously, he was in a state of extreme sadness, so he didn't know that the white-eyed wolf had escaped. He knew that he would be angry, so he found an excuse to run away. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead, feeling weak both physically and mentally. Bastard. He can run away, but he can't run away. The blood ancestor was extremely angry. The moment he returned, he played such a huge joke on him and almost lost half his life. The Feather Emperor, the little rabbit, and Yunzing looked at each other and couldn't help but shake their heads and smile bitterly. As expected, it was still that bastard who scared people to death. All right, let's go over and sit down. The Feather Emperor patted the blood ancestor's back and turned to walk toward the pavilion. If you have the ability, don't come to Sky Cloud Island for the rest of your life. The blood ancestor stared into the distance and snorted. Then he returned to the pavilion and immediately picked up a teacup to drink tea to calm himself down. The Feather Emperor poured tea and asked with a smile, Did you guys just come back? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, I came to visit you and the patriarch as soon as I came back. I'm considered filial. The Feather Emperor shook his head and sighed. These years we've been worried every day, but fortunately, you guys have returned safely. The blood ancestor drank the tea and felt much better. He looked at Qin Feiyang and the madman and asked, Are there any injuries? Don't worry. No. The number of people who went back is the same as the number of people who came back. Longqin and Longqin have also returned to the dragon nest. Not only that, I also brought back a gift for Big Brother. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. What gift? The little rabbit's eyes lit up. Qin Feiyang secretly sent a voice transmission to the king and took out the divine wine that he had prepared. When he took it out, Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. It turned out to be 2 interspatial rings. In other words, the king gave him 2 interspatial rings of divine wine. Even if he drank it continuously, It would be enough to last him a few hundred years. Seeing the 2 interspatial rings, the little rabbit couldn't wait to grab them and check them carefully. Damn! Immediately, he was stunned. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "They're all divine wine, and some of them might be of a higher level than the unparalleled divine wine. Are you satisfied with this gift?" Yes, very satisfied." The little rabbit laughed loudly. For the blood ancestor and the feather emperor, it might not be valuable, but for the little rabbit, it was definitely a treasure. "Sure enough, you know me well." After saying that, the little rabbit immediately took out a jar of divine wine and tasted it eagerly. You still gave him so much wine. Sooner or later, he will drink himself to death. The feather emperor was speechless. "Shut up. It has nothing to do with you." The little rabbit glared at him fiercely, then turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "You're not bad, kid. You have to work harder in the future." Qin Feiyang chuckled. "Drink. I'll let you drink to your heart's content first. I'll settle accounts with you later." Lin Yi deliberately hid such a big thing from him. Thinking of this, he was angry. The feather emperor asked, "What have you experienced in the divine kingdom over the years?" "Nothing much. Anyway, it's just some fighting and killing." Qin Feiyang only said a few words. The reason why he didn't go into detail was that he didn't want the blood ancestor, the feather emperor, and the little rabbit to worry. The little rabbit and the feather emperor had worked hard for the sky cloud realm for so many years. They should enjoy life. "Kid, if you don't want to tell us, just tell us." The feather emperor shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, "But it's fine. You are no longer the little brats of the past. You already have the ability to take charge. Now, your prestige in the sky cloud realm is even higher than us old guys. Instead of worrying about this, it's better to live out your remaining years peacefully so as not to cause trouble for you." "You can't say that. You should live out your remaining years peacefully, but you will never cause trouble for us." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. "Okay, we won't ask more about the divine kingdom. I just want to ask, is it over now?" The feather emperor asked with some expectations. "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. The feather emperor was slightly taken aback. The expectation on his face turned into disappointment. He nodded and said, "Understood. It means that you will go to the divine kingdom again and continue to fight. This will also be the last battle." Qin Feiyang smiled. His tone was relaxed and his expression was calm. However, the feather emperor, the little rabbit, the blood ancestor, and Yunzing had already realized the danger of this last battle. The last battle was about to break out, but Qin Feiyang and the others all returned to the sky cloud realm at this time. What did this mean? It meant Qin Feiyang and the others had no confidence in this last battle. Therefore, they came back to take a look before the battle, lest there would be no chance in the future. Chapter 40, 3:24. Seeing the heavy atmosphere, the maniac turned to Qin Feiyang and said, "Why don't you all chat? Xian, and I will head to the western continent." "Sure." Qin Feiyang nodded. He waved his hand and summoned Zhuo Shaoxian. Xian, greets the 3 seniors. Zhuo Shaoxian greeted the Emperor of Feather, the blood progenitor, and the little rabbit. The Emperor of Feather nodded and said with a smile, "The little girl is getting prettier. Maniac, you should cherish her. Otherwise, many people will try to steal her from you." The maniac wrapped his arm around Zhuo Shaoxian's waist and said proudly, "Who dares to steal my woman? Can't you be more reserved?" Zhuo Shaoxian glared at the maniac. Her face blushed as the Emperor of Feather and the others stared at her. What the hell is being reserved? Is it edible? The maniac clenched his teeth. Zhuo Shaoxian was speechless. Why did she fall in love with this asshole in the first place? Why are you wasting your time with them? Let's head to the western continent. Your old man will be shocked if he sees you coming back." The maniac smirked. "He's my father, not some old man." Zhuo Shaoxian was furious. Even though it was still too early for him to address the other party as father-in-law, out of etiquette and respect, he should at least address him as uncle or uncle. I know. My future father-in-law." "Don't worry, I'll behave myself in front of him." The maniac opened a space-time tunnel and comforted Zhuo Shaoxian as he walked toward it. The Emperor of Feather and the Blood progenitor shook their heads. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. The Emperor of Feather shook his head and said, "The Blood Demon Emperor is so obedient to a little girl. It's hilarious." Qin Feiyang was slightly startled before he burst out laughing too. Indeed, what kind of person was the Blood Demon Emperor? He was on par with the Emperor of Feather, the Blood progenitor, the Beast God, the Little Rabbit, the Dragon King, Feng Ho, and the Qilin. How awe-inspiring and domineering was that? Not to mention his previous life. Just the lunatic in this life was not someone that an ordinary woman could control. But now, in front of Zhuo Shaoxian, the lunatic seemed to have taken some kind of drug. It was undeniable that Zhuo Shaoxian was indeed good-looking, sweet and pure. But there were many women in this world who were prettier than Zhuo Shaoxian. However, the lunatic's behavior was obvious to all. No matter how beautiful a woman was, he wouldn't take a second look at her. Yet, he was deeply in love with Zhuo Shaoxian. For example, Jiang Yunshuang and Jiang Zishan, were these women bad? Not bad at all. They were all devastatingly beautiful women. But Lunatic didn't feel anything at all. What else could he say? One could only say that this was the destiny of the madman and Zhuo Shaoxian. The blood ancestor smiled and asked, "How strong are you now?" "Our strength." Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He waved his hand and said, "It's better not to say it so as not to hurt you." "Brat, you're really arrogant." The little rabbit's eyebrows jumped. She grabbed the wine pot and ran to the sky above the sea, provoking, "Come, let's spar." "Are you sure?" Qin Feiyang looked at the little rabbit with a faint smile. The little rabbit looked at Qin Feiyang's eyes and actually felt a little flustered. She coughed dryly and said, "Don't activate the will of the heavenly Tao and the laws of life and death." "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded. He didn't get up. With a wave of his hand, the ultimate profundities of the six supreme laws instantly appeared and attacked the little rabbit. What? Yun Ziang, the Feather Emperor, and the Blood Ancestor were stunned. The laws of death, the laws of life, the laws of destruction, the laws of space-time, the laws of time, the laws of karma. He had actually comprehended so many ultimate, profound meanings. The little rabbit was also dumbstruck as she stared at the six ultimate, profound meanings. This was ridiculous. If the laws of life and death were included, wouldn't that mean that this fellow had already grasped seven ultimate profundities? Stop. When she came back to her senses, the little rabbit hurriedly waved her hand. However, Qin Feiyang turned a deaf ear to him. His eyes were full of ridicule. "Can't I admit defeat?" the little rabbit roared. Seeing that Qin Feiyang had no intention of stopping, the little rabbit was about to cry. It was really unlucky to encounter such a monster. Boom! With a loud bang, the little rabbit screamed on the spot. Her body was dripping with blood as she fell into the sea below. She was in an extremely sorry state. This was still Qin Feiyang showing mercy. Otherwise, the little rabbit would have been smashed to pieces. When they first came to the sky cloud realm, the little rabbit's strength was indeed something that Qin Feiyang could only look up to. However, it was different now. Their identities had been swapped. Even if the little rabbit used all her skills, it would be difficult for her to block Qin Feiyang's move. Splash! Along with a wave, the little rabbit rushed out, dripping wet. She glared at Qin Feiyang and said, "Brat, you must have done it on purpose." "Yes, I did it on purpose." Qin Feiyang nodded. "You heartless bastard." Have you forgotten how Uncle Rabbit took care of you before? The little rabbit was burning with anger. It was worse than a white-eyed wolf. A white-eyed wolf. Stop it. Qin Feiyang's face turned black and said angrily, "Let me ask you, where is Lin Yi now?" Ha! When the little rabbit heard this, she suddenly panicked. When Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor heard this question, they couldn't help but look at the little rabbit with gloating eyes. They already knew about Lin Yi's incident on Sky Cloud Island when Lin Yi was crossing her tribulation. They had already advised the little rabbit that it was best to tell Qin Feiyang as soon as possible, lest Qin Feiyang find out by himself. It would be difficult to end the matter by then, but the little rabbit just didn't believe it. She thought that Qin Feiyang couldn't find out. "Say it," Qin Feiyang urged. "How would I know?" "You go and ask her yourself." The little rabbit snorted coldly. Still pretending? Qin Feiyang looked at her coldly. The little rabbit was very guilty. "Does this guy already know that Lin Yi was hidden by me? But it doesn't make sense. No one told me. How could I know? Wait, did Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor tell this kid?" The little rabbit immediately glared at Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor. Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor were helpless. Are they such talkative people? Don't look at them. They didn't say it. Qin Feiyang's face turned black. If it weren't for Mu Qing's investigation, he would still be in the dark. "Then how do you know?" The little rabbit was stunned. "Admit it." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. "Ha!" The little rabbit laughed dryly, returned to the pavilion, and took out a jar of divine wine again. Yun Ziang glanced at Qin Feiyang, looked at the little rabbit, and asked, "Is Lin Yi really here?" "Ahem." The little rabbit coughed and nodded. "Yes, she has been cultivating in the cave house below." "Ah." Yun Ziang was stunned and said with a wry smile, "You are really something. You actually hid it from us for so many years. You are too stupid. Do you understand?" The little rabbit despised, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "How did you know?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, "Mu Qing found it with omniscient eye." "What? Omniscient eye found it?" The little rabbit and the others looked at each other. Mu Qing's omniscient eye hasn't evolved yet, right? How could she find Lin Yi's whereabouts? Could it be yes? Mu Qing's omniscient eye has evolved. Not only Mu Qing, but Mu Tianyang, Demon Ancestor, and Dong Jingyang's battle souls have also evolved. Qin Feiyang nodded. "So, their old enemy is really in the Divine Kingdom?" Feather Emperor frowned. Not only that, but we have also found the old enemy of Yi and Ancestor Lu Jingyang. Qin Feiyang said, "This is a good thing." Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor were very excited. The evolution of these strongest battle souls was the safest guarantee for the Sky Cloud realm, because each strongest battle soul had the power to defy the heavens. It was no wonder that Qin Feiyang and the others could return safely from the Divine Kingdom. Then, how did you achieve these ultimate, profound truths of the strongest laws? Yun Ziang was curious. He had a deep understanding of the difficulty of the ultimate, profound truths of the strongest laws. Over the years, he had been comprehending them. And there was also the time array. But now he hadn't even comprehended one. But Qin Feiyang had already comprehended so many. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "This is the main reason why I came back." Huh. The four's faces were full of doubts. Could it be that the ultimate profound truths of the strongest laws were a shortcut? There was indeed a shortcut, and they also knew that it was to integrate the inheritance. But in this world, how could there be so many ultimate, profound truths of the strongest laws? Even the Sky Bell divine treasure was rare. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. "Fire Lotus, leave 3,000 ultimate, profound truths inheritance and give the rest to me. Also, give me 1/3 of the ordinary, profound truths inheritance." Okay. However, this will take some time. Fire Lotus's voice sounded. It's okay. A day outside is 1,000 years inside. It won't take long. Qin Feiyang smiled secretly. Fire Lotus immediately called Pei Dason and Pei Hongyu to get busy. Don't keep us in suspense. Tell us quickly, Little Rabbit urged. What's the hurry? Qin Feiyang glared at her and said, Let Lin Yi come out first. Little Rabbit smiled embarrassedly and looked at Yunzing. Hurry up and call this girl out. Now you know how to order me around. Don't you usually not let me in? Yunziang pursed his lips. I dare you to say another word of nonsense. Little Rabbit glared fiercely. Yunzang shrank his neck and immediately got up and rushed down the mountain. Qin Feiyang dared to challenge Little Rabbit, but he didn't have such courage. If Little Rabbit wanted to deal with him, there were at least 800 ways to do so. In the future, he wouldn't be able to live a peaceful life in the Sky Cloud realm. Swish! Not long after, two figures rushed out from the mountain. Qin Feiyang looked up, and a smile suddenly climbed on his face. Next to Yunziang was a woman in her 20s. She was exquisite and slender. Her black hair was like a waterfall. She wore a white dress that didn't attract any dust. She looked like a fairy. That's right. It was Lin Yi, who he had not seen for a long time. Brother Feiyang? When Lin Yi saw Qin Feiyang, she couldn't help but look stunned. Didn't Brother Feiyang go to the Divine Kingdom? How did he appear in the Sky Cloud realm? Oh no, I have been hiding it from Brother Feiyang all these years. He must be very angry. At this moment, she was panicking. She didn't even dare to enter the pavilion. How could Qin Feiyang not know what Lin Yi was thinking at this moment? He said with a straight face, What are you doing outside? Do you want me to invite you in? Chapter 43:25. It's over. Brother Feiyang is really angry. Lin Yi lowered her head, clenched her sleeves, and entered the pavilion nervously. Qin Feiyang got up and walked to Lin Yi with heavy steps. Brother Feiyang, Lin Yi didn't dare to look up, because she had already felt Qin Feiyang's anger. But suddenly a warm hand patted her head. You silly girl. Do you know how worried I have been about you all these years? If Mu Qing hadn't found your whereabouts, I'm afraid I would have thought that something bad had happened to you until now. Following that, a heart-warming sentence reached her ears. Brother Feiyang. Lin Yi looked up at Qin Feiyang, but in Qin Feiyang's eyes, she saw only concern for her. She felt guilty and said, I'm sorry. Silly girl, what are you apologizing for? As long as you are fine. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly and rubbed Lin Yi's head gently. His eyes were full of doting. Then he took Lin Yi to the stone table and sat down. Sure enough, their relationship is deep. Feather Emperor and Blood Ancestor looked at each other and smiled. How is it? Over the years, did my brother make you suffer? Don't be afraid of him. I am here. If he dares to make you suffer, I will torture him. Qin Feiyang said. Heartless. The little rabbit grumbled discontentedly. Over the years, he had trained Lin Yi as a personal disciple. Whenever there was something good, the first thing he thought of was Lin Yi. No, he is very good to me and takes good care of me. Lin Yi shook her head. Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, Then your memory? Before Qin Feiyang spoke, Lin Yi smiled and said, It doesn't matter anymore. Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He looked at Lin Yi for a moment and nodded. Yes, the past is not important. As long as we live well now, it's fine. In fact, he would rather Lin Yi not recover her previous memory, because the previous memory, whether it was for Lin Yi or him, was a shackle. Wouldn't it be better to be like this? There were no superfluous elements. It was a pure sibling relationship. Qin Dage is ready. There are about 6,500 inheritances. At this moment, Fire Lotus's voice rang in Qin Feiyang's mind. So many? Qin Feiyang was slightly surprised and asked, "Did you leave 3,000 copies?" "Yes," Fire Lotus replied. 3,000 and 6,500? Qin Feiyang was a little surprised. Initially, he had thought that there would at most be a little more than 9,000 servings. However, there were 500 more servings now. One should know that each inheritance contained 6 ultimate profound meanings. 500 ultimate profound meanings meant that there were 3,000 ultimate profound meanings. Even the Sky Bell Divine Treasure wouldn't be able to find so many inheritances of 3,000 ultimate profundities, even if they searched every corner. For the Sky Cloud Realm, it was an astronomical figure. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and an interspatial ring appeared. Immediately, Feather Emperor, Blood Ancestor, Little Rabbit, Yunxiang, and Lin Yi couldn't help but look at the interspatial ring. Their faces were full of suspicion. "This is the gift I have prepared for the Sky Cloud Realm." Qin Feiyang smiled and handed the interspatial ring to Feather Emperor. Feather Emperor took the interspatial ring and looked down. His face suddenly froze. "What is it? Why are you so surprised?" Blood Ancestor and Little Rabbit frowned. "Take a look for yourselves." Feather Emperor took a deep breath, calmed down the shock in his heart, and handed the interspatial ring to the two. After the two checked it one after another, they were also stunned. The reaction of the three made Lin Yi and Yunxiang even more surprised. "What amazing treasures are in the interspatial ring! Take a look." Blood Ancestor and Little Rabbit also calmed down the shock in their hearts and handed the interspatial ring to the two. When the two saw it, they were dumbfounded on the spot. How is this possible? They are all inheritances of ultimate profound meanings. Is this the foundation of the divine kingdom? How terrifying! Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Even the divine kingdom can't find so many inheritances." "Huh!" The four looked at him in a daze. "What do you mean? Could it be that these inheritances were not obtained from the divine nations?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "These ultimate profound meaning inheritances were indeed collected in the divine kingdom, but they were obtained through extraordinary means." Extraordinary means? The four were taken aback. Yes, Long Qin has mastered a powerful secret technique called soul manipulation. As long as one is controlled by the soul manipulation, he can easily strip the other party of their ultimate profound meaning. Qin Feiyang smiled. He actually mastered such a terrifying secret technique. The four were shocked. When they came back to their senses, Feather Emperor asked, "You mean these inheritances were extracted by Long Qin in the divine kingdom?" "Yes. There are more than 110,000 ultimate profound meaning inheritances in total. There are even more ordinary ultimate profound meaning inheritances, more than 700,000. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "So many?" The four were shaken. More than 700,000 ordinary ultimate profound meaning inheritances. More than 110,000 ultimate profound meaning inheritances. This was simply unheard of. Yunxiang asked, "Are there so many experts in the divine kingdom?" His voice was full of disbelief. "A lot. The people we hunted are just the tip of the iceberg." Qin Feiyang smiled vaguely. The four looked at each other, shocked to the extreme. With so many ultimate profound meaning inheritances, how many experts of the divine kingdom had they hunted? Even so, this was just the tip of the iceberg of the divine kingdom. It was hard to imagine how terrifying the divine kingdom's foundation was. "You gave us so many inheritances at once. What about the people around you?" The Blood Ancestor frowned. "Don't worry about that. The people around me have already obtained the inheritances they need. This is what's left. And I still have 3,000 in my hands." Qin Feiyang said, "That's good. The blood ancestor breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at the yin and yang rings on the table, he couldn't help but laugh. With these inheritances, the rise of the sky cloud realm is just around the corner. That's right. The Feather Emperor and the little rabbit were also very excited. This was simply giving them a huge treasure that could change the fate of the sky cloud realm. Qin Feiyang glanced at the heaven cloud divine treasury located in the mountains below and said with a smile, "There's no need to put these inheritances of ultimate profundities into the heaven cloud divine treasury. Just pick some perfect sovereigns and let them fuse with them. Just give it to them." The Feather Emperor, the Blood Ancestor, and the little rabbit were stunned. Yes, Qin Feiyang nodded. Are you kidding? How can there be such a thing? Wouldn't that be letting them off too easily? The three frowned. I knew you would definitely object, but you have to listen to me on this matter. I definitely have my reasons for this arrangement. Of course, the target of the nurturing must be trustworthy. Demonic Hall, Rogue Cultivator Alliance, Sky Hall, Deity Hall. A few years ago, when the Divine Kingdom invaded the Sky Cloud realm, they also made a lot of contributions. There's also the dragons, Feng people, and the Qilin clan. You have to take care of them too. Qin Feiyang said. The Blood Ancestor frowned and said, We don't object to the four forces of the Demonic Hall. After all, they have already submitted to you. Now, you are the Honorary Hall Masters and Alliance Masters of the four forces. But the dragons, Feng people, and the Qilin clan, at this point, the Blood Ancestors' eyes flashed with a cold light. Honorary Hall Masters and Alliance Masters? What's going on? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Not long after you left, the four forces of the Demonic Hall announced that you, the Lunatic, and the White-Eyed Wolf will be their Honorary Hall Masters and Alliance Masters from now on. At that time, we were also very puzzled. But when we asked Elder Hua and the others, we learned that this matter has already been approved by you. The Blood Ancestor said, Is there such a thing? Qin Feiyang scratched his head. Suddenly he slapped his forehead. There really was such a thing, but it had been too long, and he had forgotten about it. But at that time, that was just a joke. He didn't expect Elder Hua and the others to really do that. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, You are still biased against the Feng people, the Qilin clan, and the dragons. How can we not be biased? Don't forget that the human emperor died in the hands of the Dragon King, and the other two. The Blood Ancestor said angrily. I didn't forget. But didn't the Dragon King and the other two pay the price with their lives? Back then, I said that as long as the three of them died, all the previous grudges would be written off. As a man, I can't go back on my words. Moreover, it's all thanks to Long Qin that we were able to obtain these inheritances. Now that he's with the dragons, we have to take the dragons into consideration. This is the most basic principle of life. As for the Feng people and the Qilin clan, the Fire Phoenix is the princess of the Feng people, and the Fire Qilin is the holy son of the Qilin clan. We have to take care of them. Of course, if you really have a problem with them, you can give them less. Qin Feiyang smiled and said. The Feather Emperor and the other two pondered for a while, then nodded and said, All right, you guys worked hard to obtain these inheritances. You can arrange it however you want. Also, you guys should integrate a few more inheritances. It's best to integrate all 8 ultimate laws. The difference between an ultimate profundity of 8 supreme laws and an ultimate profundity of 6 supreme laws is still quite large. At that time, if someone dares to act rashly, you guys will have enough strength to suppress them. Qin Feiyang said. Then, aren't we getting a big advantage? The Feather Emperor laughed. This is what you deserve, Yuzichin said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He glanced at Sky Cloud Island and asked suspiciously, Why don't I see the 4 guardian beasts? Them. Usually, they are not on Sky Cloud Island. The Feather Emperor laughed. Qin Feiyang said, Ancestor, You have to take special care of the 4 guardian beasts. After all, they have done too much for the Sky Cloud realm. Do I need you to tell me that? They are my teachers. Don't worry. Even if they don't want it, I will force the inheritances of the 8 ultimate laws on them, the Feather Emperor said. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, there is also the Sea Lion Emperor and the other beast gods in the land of buried gods. They are all on our side, so we have to take special care of them. Kid, you still have a conscience. You haven't forgotten them. The Feather Emperor and the Blood Ancestor laughed. How would I dare to forget? If it weren't for them, how would I be who I am today? Qin Feiyang sighed. In the Sky Cloud realm, these people had helped him a lot. As the saying goes, a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. If he didn't even have a basic sense of gratitude, was he worthy of being called a human? Chapter 43:26. Other than that, Qin Feiyang waved his hand again, and another interspatial ring appeared. What is this? Several people were surprised. There should be more than 200,000 ultimate, profound inheritances of ordinary laws. You can put these inheritances into the heavenly cloud divine treasure. It can also be considered as giving other ordinary creatures a chance. Qin Feiyang smiled. The Blood Ancestor and the other 2 looked at each other. This kid was really dedicated to the heavenly cloud realm. The Feather Emperor stood up and cupped his hands. On behalf of the heavenly cloud realm, I sincerely thank you. Ancestor, what are you saying? Isn't this what I should do? Besides, how can I accept this bow of yours? I'm afraid my life will be shortened. Qin Feiyang shook his head. You brat. The Feather Emperor laughed and looked up at the sky. If Big Brother knows that there is a descendant like you, I believe he will be very happy in the underworld. Human Emperor, Qin Feiyang murmured. The biggest regret in his life was that he couldn't see this great ancestor. Then, he looked at Yun Ziang. Why are you looking at me? Yun Ziang was suspicious. Nothing. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. Ancestor, Big Brother, have you been sure over the years whether he is the reincarnation of the human emperor? We have been observing him. However, it doesn't look like it. Although Yun Ziang's character is not bad, compared to the human emperor, it seems to be a lot worse. The Blood Ancestor thought. What do you mean? We know the human emperor too well. He has never had the slightest selfishness for the sake of the world. If there is a saint in this world, then he must be a saint. But Yun Ziang, we all think that he is too selfish. Of course. His selfishness is nothing compared to those who are truly selfish. But compared to the human emperor, he is indeed a lot worse. Little Rabbit said, It is normal for people to be selfish. Furthermore, after reincarnation, his personality will definitely change. Qin Feiyang mumbled. We thought so too, but it's still a little hard to accept. Because Yun Ziang's talent, courage, and responsibility are far from the human emperor's. The Blood Ancestor transmitted. If he isn't, why would the princess of the divine kingdom strip the ultimate profound and give it to him? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. This is also what we can't figure out. Maybe he really is the reincarnation of Ren Huang. Maybe it's just as you said. After he was reincarnated, many things changed. Little Rabbit said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said to himself, Let's not talk about this for now. There was no point in discussing this now. Since he was going to return to Great Qin, he could just ask Ji Tianyue. Has the Sky Cloud realm been peaceful all these years? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Yes. Ever since you guys entered the Divine Kingdom, the Sky Cloud realm has been peaceful. However, no one dares to let down their guard and has been working hard to cultivate. The Feather Emperor smiled. What about Longzuan? She hasn't done anything these years. Qin Feiyang asked. No, maybe she is afraid of our strength. The blood ancestor said with a smile. Afraid of your strength? Qin Feiyong was stunned and said with a bitter smile, Old ancestor, don't underestimate Longzuan. She might have already grasped the will of the heavens. It's just that you guys don't know about it. What? The blood ancestor's face changed. Don't forget whose woman she is. I am sure that she definitely has enough ultimate, profound inheritance in her hands to let her grasp the will of the heavens. Qin Feiyong said. The Feather Emperor and the blood ancestor looked at each other and their hearts sank. Indeed, as Ice Dragon's woman, how could Longzuan be willing to be ordinary? She was really careless. I think that she didn't run out to harm the Sky Cloud realm all these years. It should be because before she left, Long Chun told her something. Anyway, you guys must not ignore this woman. Qin Feiyong reminded. Got it. The Feather Emperor and the other two nodded. Okay, I'll go take a look. Qin Feiyong got up and smiled. Where are you going? The Feather Emperor was suspicious. Just take a look. In addition, don't leak out the matter of us coming back, so as not to cause unnecessary chaos. After Qin Feiyong said, he looked at Lin Yi and asked, Do you want to go together? Okay. Lin Yi nodded obediently. Qin Feiyong smiled slightly, changed his appearance a little, opened a space-time passage, and led Lin Yi away. This brat is really the lucky star of our Sky Cloud realm. The blood ancestor chuckled. The little rabbit looked at the blood ancestor playfully and said, You didn't say this before. You used to say that he is a jinx. Wherever he goes, disaster follows. Are you a professional teardown? The blood ancestor glared at the little rabbit fiercely. The Feather Emperor looked at the two helplessly and said, Okay, stop arguing. Let's quickly discuss how to distribute these 6,500 Supreme Law Ultimate Inheritance. Looking at the interspatial rings on the table, his heart was a little heavy. Qin Feiyong came back in advance to make these arrangements, which was enough to show that the situation in the Divine Kingdom was not optimistic. But since Qin Feiyong didn't say anything, he couldn't do anything. Moreover, even if he told him, he couldn't help. He heard about it. The blood ancestor and the little rabbit stopped arguing, lowered their heads, and pondered. In front of serious business, they couldn't play around. Let's do it this way. For people like Elder Hua, Chu Yin, Alliance Master, Deputy Alliance Master, He Zhongtian, and the Sky Palace Master, we'll give them 8 inheritances. The blood ancestor said, I think it's okay because these people are the people that third brother trusts the most. The little rabbit nodded. There is one more person. This person is Huo Wenchang, Huo Wu's father. Back then, he publicly scolded Feng Ho for Huo Wu and left the Feng people. He is also a man with a true temperament. The Feather Emperor said. There was a trace of admiration in his words for Huo Wenchang. This person is indeed good. He clearly distinguishes between kindness and hatred. The blood ancestor and the little rabbit nodded. Of course. There is also Ziang and little Azura. These years they have been working hard for the Sky Cloud realm. We have to take special care of them. The Feather Emperor looked at Yun Ziang next to him and smiled. Yun Ziang laughed dryly. The blood ancestor suddenly seemed to think of something. He looked at the Feather Emperor and the little rabbit and said, Don't forget, there is a group of people that we have to take special care of. Who? The Feather Emperor and the little rabbit were suspicious. The blood demon race. The blood ancestor said word by word. The Feather Emperor and the little rabbit looked at each other and couldn't help but look in the direction of the Een demon land. The blood demon race indeed needed to be taken care of, because back then, the blood demon race had sacrificed too much. It could be said that whether it was the Sky Cloud realm, the ancient world, Great Qin, or the Forgotten Continent, they all owed the blood demon race a favor. Cloud Sea City. A man and a woman entered the city. Looking at the bustling streets, there was a smile on their faces. You have been in the sky cloud realm for so many years, but you haven't come to the eastern continent to take a look, right? The young man asked with a smile. The two were Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi. No, I have always been on Sky Cloud Island. Lin Yi shook her head. Qin Feiyang said with dissatisfaction, this big brother is too much. It's not wrong to cultivate hard, but sometimes he should let you out to get some fresh air. He is also doing it for my own good. Lin Yi smiled. Forget it. Let's not talk about him. It's rare to have time. I will take you around. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly and said, Okay. Lin Yi nodded like a good girl. She enjoyed Qin Feiyang's care for her. On the street, there was a lot of traffic. Qin Feiyang kept passing by the pedestrians on the street. However, from beginning to end, no one realized that the man who passed by them was the patron saint of their sky cloud realm. Lin Yi pointed to a place not far away and said, Brother Feiyang, there is a jewelry store there. Shall we go in and take a look? Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Girls usually had a special fondness for all kinds of beautiful jewelry. The two entered the store. There were many women inside. There were young women in their 20s and noble women. They were all looking for jewelry that they liked. The jewelry in the store was also dazzling and exquisite. The store was very large, and the decoration was also very high-end. Obviously, the people who came in and out of the store were either rich or noble. Young master, young miss, hello. What kind of style do you two like? I can introduce it to you two. A young woman greeted them. She was a staff member here. She thought that Qin Feiyang was a couple. No need, we will see it ourselves. Lin Yi smiled politely. Okay. The woman was also quite sensible. She silently retreated to the back and followed Qin Feiyang. Suddenly, Lin Yi saw a good hairpin. She walked up and looked down at it. This hairpin was snow white with a crystal luster. The top was inlaid with a delicate lotus flower, giving an elegant and noble aura. Do you like it? I will give it to you. Qin Feiyang smiled. I like it very much. Lin Yi nodded. The staff member behind her heard the words and immediately walked into the counter. She took out the hairpin and handed it to Qin Feiyang. She smiled and said, Young master, you might as well put it on for young Mississippi. Qin Feiyang smiled, took the hairpin, and slowly inserted it into Lin Yi's hair. There was a saying that clothes make the man and saddle make the horse. But now, this sentence was the complete opposite. This hairpin was now even more distinctive because it was worn on Lin Yi's head. It looks good. Even the staff member couldn't help but marvel. Because no one knew her, Lin Yi did not change her appearance. Whether it was her appearance or her temperament, they could be called stunning. Qin Feiyang looked at it for a while, looked at the staff member and smiled. Pay the bill directly. Okay. The staff member nodded. He didn't even ask about the price first. It seemed that in order to win the beauty's heart, he would pay a lot. However, at this moment, a hand appeared, grabbed the hairpin on Lin Yi's head and pulled it out. And Lin Yi was taken aback. She turned her head and looked suspiciously. She saw a 17 or 18-year-old young man in purple clothes, holding the hairpin and looking back and forth. This situation made Lin Yi frown immediately. Chapter 43:27. Qin Feiyang, who was about to pay the bill, inadvertently noticed this scene. He couldn't help but turn to look at the purple-clothed young man. What does this mean? Snatch it directly from our hands? Young Master Shun? The staff member turned his head and looked. There was a trace of surprise on his face. He quickly walked over and smiled flatteringly. Young Master Wang, I didn't expect you to come. This so-called young Master Wang ignored the woman's flattery, let alone Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi. His attitude seemed to treat them as air. Then he handed the jade hairpin to the woman and said faintly, I want this jade hairpin. Wrap it up for me. Wrap it up nicely. I want to give it to someone. Ah, The woman was taken aback. She looked at young Master Wang with some embarrassment and said, "Young Master Wang, someone has already taken a fancy to this jade hairpin." "Who?" Young Master Wang raised his eyebrows. "You took it from my head. You still don't know who it is?" Lin Yi frowned. Young Master Wang asked faintly, "Did you pay the bill?" "No." Lin Yi shook her head. "You didn't pay the bill. Is this yours?" Young Master Wang sneered and looked at the woman. "Hurry up. Don't waste my time." The woman was in a dilemma. Qin Feiang looked at the arrogant young master and smiled. "Little brother, we did take a fancy to this jade hairpin first. If you like it, let the shop prepare another one for you." When the woman heard this, she quickly looked at Qin Feiang and explained, "Young master, the accessories in our shop are unique." "Unique?" Qin Feiang was taken aback. "Yes, there is only one piece of each accessory. This is to improve the value and uniqueness of the accessory. This is meaningful." The woman nodded. "It turns out to be like this." Qin Feiang nodded and smiled. "Your boss is really good at doing business. The price of a unique item can naturally be much higher." "Ha!" The woman laughed dryly. "Get lost if you can't afford it." Young Master Wang glanced at Qin Feiang contemptuously. Qin Feiang stared blankly at this young man. Shouldn't there be a first come, first served rule when it came to buying things? Not only did he run out halfway to snatch it from them, he even spoke rudely. Seeing that the atmosphere was not right, the woman hurriedly looked at young Master Wang and said, "Why don't you choose something else? Our shop also has many good accessories." "No, I'll take this one." The purple-clad young man shook his head, but the woman was a little helpless. She turned her head and looked at Qin Feiang and Lin Yi for help. She asked, "Why don't you two pick another one?" When Lin Yi heard this, she looked at Yu Zhan and frowned. "I'm begging you." "We can't afford to offend this person," the woman whispered. "Can't afford to offend him?" Qin Feiang was stunned. In the Sky Cloud realm, was there anyone that Qin Feiang could not afford to offend? This made him a little curious. This person is Theta Wang Chuan. He is a core disciple of the Demon Palace. It is said that he has entered the Heavenly Cloud Divine Treasure before and obtained 2 law miniatures. His future is limitless. The woman explained. It turns out that he is a core disciple of the Demon Palace. No wonder he is so arrogant. The commotion here had already alarmed the other guests. They were all gathered not far away. When they heard the woman's words, they couldn't help but shrink their pupils. They looked at Theta Wang Chuan again with fear in their eyes. At the same time, Qin Feiang and Lin Yi looked at each other with a trace of surprise. What surprised them was not that Theta Wang Chuan was a core disciple of the Demon Palace, but that this person had entered the Heavenly Cloud Divine Treasure and obtained 2 law miniatures. As the creator of the Heavenly Cloud Divine Treasure, Qin Feiang certainly knew the situation of the Heavenly Cloud Divine Treasure. To obtain 2 law miniatures, it really required a lot of luck. Theta Wang Chuan stared at Qin Feiang and Lin Yi and said impatiently, "Since you already know my identity, you'd better be sensible. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences later." Ugh! These words stunned Qin Feiang and Lin Yi for a long time. Bear the consequences later? They didn't expect that there would be someone in the Heavenly Cloud realm who dared to say such words to them, especially Qin Feiang. Not only was he the creator of the Heavenly Cloud Divine Treasure, but he was also the honorary Hall Master of the Demon Palace. The law miniatures of the Heavenly Cloud Divine Treasure were also his. Now, such a small core disciple dared to show off in front of him. It was really interesting. The woman looked at Qin Feiang and Lin Yi and asked, "Young master, young lady, you see?" Her eyes were full of pleading. Qin Feiang was about to speak, but Lin Yi waved her hand and said, "Forget it. It's just a jade hairpin. There is no need to bother with him." Qin Feiang was taken aback and looked at Lin Yi puzzledly. Lin Yi secretly smiled and said, with your identity and status, if you bother with a disciple, others may say that you are narrow-minded. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Look at what a considerate girl she is. I wonder who will have the blessing to marry this girl in the future. You are sensible. Wrap it up for me. Theta Wang Chuan glanced coldly at Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi, then looked at the woman and said, Okay. The woman nodded and smiled apologetically at Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi. Then, she led Theta Wang Chuan to the counter. Demon Palace. It's getting worse and worse now. Yeah. The customers around whispered. Qin Feiyang frowned slightly when he heard these words. What does this mean? Why is the Demon Palace getting worse and worse? Brother, you are very wise. This is a disciple of the Demon Palace. We ordinary people can't afford to offend him. A black-clothed young man walked over, patted Qin Feiyang on the shoulder, and left the shop. Qin Feiyang looked at the back of the black-clothed young man and frowned. What happened to the Demon Palace these years? Why does it seem that there are complaints everywhere? I don't know. I have never been to the Eastern continent. Lin Yi shook her head. Did Big Brother tell you about the situation of the Demon Palace? Qin Feiyang asked. No. He has always asked me to cultivate in seclusion peacefully and ignore the outside world. Lin Yi said. It's strange. Qin Feiyang murmured, looked at Lin Yi and smiled. Then let's go and see other accessories. No need. I'm not in the mood. Lin Yi shook her head. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded helplessly and led Lin Yi out of the shop. But when he walked out of the door, he turned to look at Theta Wang Chuan, who was paying the bill. He couldn't help but frown. After a while, on the street, Lin Yi tilted her head, looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Brother Feiyang, what are you thinking about? You look absent-minded after coming out of the accessory shop. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses, looked at Lin Yi and apologized. Sorry, I was thinking about something. If there's anything, you can go and solve it. Lin Yi said. It's nothing. It's just a bit strange. Didn't the Demon Palace have a good reputation in the Eastern continent before? Why is it so bad now? Qin Feiyang frowned. Maybe people like Theta Wang Chuan are just a few. Lin Yi thought for a while and said, I hope so. Qin Feiyang smiled, looked up, and locked his eyes on the street ahead. He smiled and said, I didn't expect to come here unknowingly. Since we are all here, let's go and have a seat. Lin Yi looked up suspiciously and saw a magnificent restaurant standing on the street a few hundred meters away. Tianyue Restaurant. Young master, miss, please come in. Under the reception of the waiter, Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi entered the restaurant. Are there any private rooms upstairs? Lin Yi asked. Sorry, there are no more. The waiter said apologetically. No more. What time is it now? Lin Yi looked back at the sky outside. There are still a few hours before dinner time. Why are there no more? The business of Tianyue Restaurant should be better. Looking at Lin Yi's reaction, the waiter still maintained a polite smile, but he despised her in his heart. Don't you know where this is? This is Tianyue Restaurant, the largest restaurant in the Sky Cloud realm. If you want a private room, you have to book at least 1 day in advance. Moreover, this is the headquarters of Tianyue Restaurant. They are dressed well, and their temperament is okay. Why do they look like two bumpkins? You too, if you continue to hesitate, you won't even have a seat in the hall. The waiter reminded them. Lin Yi quickly looked at the hall. Sure enough, there was only one empty table left. Let's have a seat in the hall. Qin Feiyang looked at Lin Yi and said with a smile, But don't you like quiet? Lin Yi frowned. It's okay. It just so happens that I want to inquire about the situation of Demon Palace. Qin Feiyang secretly said. A place like the hall where crooks mixed with honest folk was the best place to inquire about information. Okay. Lin Yi nodded, pointed to the empty table, and said to the waiter, "Let's have a seat there." Okay. The waiter yelled and took Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi to the table. After the two sat down, the waiter smiled and said, "What do you two need?" "I'll leave it to you." Qin Feiyang looked at Lin Yi and smiled. Lin Yi thought for a while and looked at the waiter with a smile. "Anything is fine." "Okay." The waiter nodded, turned around, and left quickly. These two are really interesting. How can they come to a restaurant so casually? It seems that they are really from the countryside. They haven't seen much of the world and are frightened. There is still half a year before the Demon Palace assessment begins. "Brother, do you want to give it a try?" In the hall, the sound of discussion was incessant. It was very noisy, but this sentence was clearly captured by Qin Feiyang. His heart moved immediately. He turned his head to look at the next table and saw two young men, one in black and one in white, sitting opposite each other. The person who asked was the young man in black on the left. Both of their cultivation bases were not high. They were only in the 9th heaven realm. They were quite ordinary, but they were not old. Demon Palace assessment. The young man in white held a wine glass, pondered for a while, shook his head and sighed. "I'm not going." "Not going?" The young man in black was taken aback. He put down the wine glass that was already at his mouth and said suspiciously, "Didn't you always say that you want to enter the Demon Palace?" "That was before. As for now, I'm going to the Rogue Cultivator Alliance in the Western Continent." The young man in white shook his head. When talking about the Demon Palace, Qin Feiyang clearly caught a trace of disgust in the eyes of the young man in white. Chapter 40, 328. What the hell is going on? Qin Feiyang frowned. His feelings for Demon Palace were obvious to all, so he didn't want Demon Palace to become like this. The two young men spoke again. "That's true. Rogue Cultivator Alliance is much better than Demon Palace now. To be honest, we should have supported Rogue Cultivator Alliance to stay in the Eastern Continent and let Demon Palace go to the Western Continent." The black-clothed young man shook his head and said, "This kind of thing isn't something small people like you and me can decide. Moreover, it was Qin Feiyang's idea to move Rogue Cultivator Alliance to the Western Continent back then." The white-clothed young man said, "Speaking of Qin Feiyang, I really admire him. Back then he, Frenzy, Golden-Winged Wolf King, Long Qin, Long Chen, Yun Xiang, Mask Shura, and Li Feng. Even when facing the sky prides of the Divine Kingdom, they didn't change their expressions. If it weren't for these people, our sky cloud realm would have been finished long ago." The black-clothed young man's eyes were full of admiration. "Yeah, we have to thank them. Otherwise, how can we live in peace now? In fact, it's reasonable to say that we should all enter Demon Palace. After all, Qin Feiyang and the others were once disciples of Demon Palace, but now—" The white-clothed young man looked quite distressed, but he didn't finish his words. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it. Let's not talk about these things, lest the people of Demon Palace hear it and cause a disaster." The black-clothed young man nodded, raised his wine glass, and smiled. "Come, let's drink. I will go to the Western Continent with you tomorrow. Even if I can't pass the assessment and become a disciple of Rogue Cultivator Alliance, it's worth it as long as I can see the glory of Rogue Cultivator Alliance. With brother accompanying me, I won't be lonely along the way." The white-clothed young man couldn't help but chuckle. At this time, the waiter came over with a few dishes and a pot of wine. "Young master, miss, the dishes are here. If you need anything later, just tell me." After putting down the dishes, the waiter left in a hurry. Why did he bring a pot of wine? Lin Yi looked at the wine pot in astonishment. "Didn't you say anything was fine? You eat first. I'll go gather some information." Qin Feiyang smiled, twisting the wine pot. He stood up and walked to the table beside him. Looking at the two youths, he smiled and said, "Brothers, can I have a chat with you?" "Ah, The two of them looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. "Don't worry, I definitely won't drink your wine," Qin Feiyang said half-jokingly. As soon as he said this, the two of them laughed involuntarily. The young man in white pointed at the empty stool beside him and said with a smile, "Brother, you're quite humorous. Have a seat." "Thank you." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He sat in front of the table and poured wine for the two of them. "Wait a moment. One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Brother, why don't you tell us why you're here? If it weren't for your wine, we wouldn't dare to drink it." The young man in white stopped Qin Feiyang and laughed. "I just want to gather some information." Qin Feiyang gently pushed the young man in white's hand away and filled the wine cups in front of the two of them. Gather some information. The two youths looked at each other, the suspicion in their eyes growing stronger. Qin Feiyang also poured a cup for himself and said with a smile, "Let me toast the two of you first." After saying that, he raised his head and drank it in one gulp. The wine of Heavenly Joy House wasn't too bad. After all, it was the largest restaurant in the Sky Cloud realm. However, Qin Feiyang found it really unpalatable when he drank it. The two of them looked at Qin Feiyang in bewilderment. Then they also drank the wine in their cups. Qin Feiyang filled their cups again before getting to the main topic. He smiled and said, "I heard the two of you talking about the Demon Palace just now. It seems like you have a big prejudice against the Demon Palace?" Hearing this, the two of them immediately became vigilant. Don't worry. I'm not a disciple of the Demon Palace. Previously, I had a small conflict with a core disciple of the Demon Palace in an accessory store." Qin Feiyang quickly comforted them. "What? You had a conflict with a core disciple of the Demon Palace?" The two of them jumped in fright. "Yes, my sister took a fancy to a jade hairpin. In the end, the disciple of the Demon Palace ran in and directly snatched it from my sister's head." Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. "So that's how it is." The black-clothed youth nodded in understanding and asked, "Then you did mess with him, right?" The white-clothed youth looked at the black-clothed youth and said with a smile, "Brother, if he did, would he still be sitting here and drinking with us?" The black-clothed youth was stunned and nodded. "That's true. Not to mention a core disciple of the Demon Palace. Even an outer sect disciple wouldn't have a good ending if they provoked him." After saying that, he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Brother, you should really go and burn incense. You managed to survive. Is it that exaggerated?" Qin Feiyang was shocked and said suspiciously, "When I was in the village, I heard that the Demon Palace was pretty good." The two of them looked at each other and then at Qin Feiyang. They shook their heads and said, "So you siblings came from the countryside. No wonder you're so naive." "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. The white-clothed youth glanced at the surrounding guests and said in a low voice, "Brother, to tell you the truth, the Demon Palace was indeed not bad in the past. Not only were they very friendly to the people of the Eastern continent, but they also took care of them very well. But now it's different." "Different?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Yes, it's not an exaggeration to say that the current Demon Palace is a gathering place for a bunch of mobs." The white-clothed youth said in disgust, "Is that really the case? We siblings are still preparing to participate in the Demon Palace's assessment, because our village is proud of entering the Demon Palace." Qin Feiyang said, "You still want to participate in the assessment?" The white-clothed youth glanced at Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi and whispered, "Brother, listen to my advice. Don't go. If you really want to stand out, you might as well go to the Rogue Cultivator Alliance. Even if you don't go to the Rogue Cultivator Alliance, it's better to go to the Heavenly Temple and Divine Temple than to enter the Demon Palace." Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Then, can you explain the reason in detail?" "It's fate that we met." "All right, we'll tell you in detail." The demon palace was indeed good in the past. We all wanted to enter, but in recent years, the demon palace seemed to have inflated. They have become selfish, indifferent, and ruthless, especially the disciples below. Each of them is like a playboy. They are arrogant and domineering outside all day long. The white-clothed youth said in a low voice. So that's what happened. Qin Feiyang suddenly realized and asked, "Are there many such disciples?" Yes, almost half of them. Being arrogant and domineering is still light. Some even bully people outside. The white-clothed youth shook his head. So overboard? Then the upper echelons of the demon palace don't do anything about it? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Do something about it? Who will do something about it? Can ordinary people like us meet the upper echelons of the demon palace? I remember that last year there was a demon palace disciple in a small town. Someone seemed to have offended him. In the end, this disciple killed that person's family because of a disagreement. This person ran to the demon palace to seek justice. In the end, before he could enter the demon palace, he was stopped by the demon palace's deacon elder. The white-clothed youth shook his head. And then Qin Feiyang asked. Then, not only did the deacon elder not seek justice for him, he even silenced him. Brother, tell me now, is such a demon palace still worth us risking our lives to enter? The white-clothed youth said. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and said in a deep voice, "Where do they find the capital to be so arrogant?" Capital? Is there even a need to say it? Their capital is Qin Feiyang, Madman Mo, and Golden-Winged Wolf King. The black-clothed youth sighed. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang frowned. How could this matter have anything to do with them? Qin Feiyang, Madman Mo, and Golden-Winged Wolf King were all disciples of the Demon Palace. In the past, the Demon Palace helped these three the most. It is also because of this that after these three rose to power, they took special care of the Demon Palace and even treated the Demon Palace as their home. In the beginning, it was still fine because these three were there. The disciples of the Demon Palace were very low-key. But good times didn't last. Not long after, these three went to the Divine Kingdom. With their departure, the Demon Palace seemed to have lost their deterrence. The disciples of the Demon Palace gradually became arrogant and looked down on everyone. In the end, this situation became worse and worse. Now they have reached a state of lawlessness. Most importantly, no one dares to interfere because they're afraid of offending Qin Feiyang and the other two. Even the Kirin's Feng people and dragons pretended not to see the disciples of the Demon Palace bullying others. The white-clothed youth sighed. Qin Feiyang said, so as time passed, they became more and more unscrupulous. That's right. Now our eastern continent is in a mess because of these people. I just can't figure it out. They are all overlords and are related to Qin Feiyang and the other two. Why are the Rogue Cultivator Alliance, the Heavenly Palace, and the Divine Palace so self-disciplined? Brother, look, I am a native of the Eastern Continent. Now, I have to go to the Rogue Cultivator Alliance of the Western Continent. Don't you think it's ridiculous? The white-clothed youth was heartbroken, and his face was full of disappointment. Those big shots of the Demon Palace don't care about these things? Qin Feiyang asked. Them. For so many years, I have never seen them show their faces. I don't even know where they are hiding and living a leisurely life. Moreover, big shots like them don't care about the life and death of small fries like us. The two shook their heads. Qin Feiyang frowned. The Demon Palace had become like this. Elder Hua, Chu Yin, and the Hall Master didn't show up. What were they trying to do? Brother, why don't we do this? We're going to the Western Continent tomorrow. You and your sister can come with us. We can take care of each other at that time. The white-clothed youth looked at Qin Feiyang and invited him in a friendly manner. Thank you, brother. I will discuss it with my sister later. Qin Feiyang smiled. Okay, the white-clothed youth nodded. Then I will go first. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he left the wine pot and stood up. You forgot the wine, the black-clothed youth said quickly. I will give it to you. Qin Feiyang smiled, turned around, walked to Lin Yi and sat down. End of chapter. Chapter 40, 329. How is the investigation going? Lin Yi asked with a smile. Sigh. I didn't expect that our care of Demon Palace would become the capital for these Demon Palace disciples to be arrogant. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. In this world, aren't most people like this? Lin Yi smiled. I'm quite disappointed, but I'm puzzled. Why didn't Elder Hua and the others come out to take care of it? Why did they allow the disciples to continue to make trouble? Qin Feiyang frowned. Lin Yi said, I heard from Little Rabbit about this. Elder Hua and the others seem to be in close cultivation. Close cultivation? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Didn't you give them the epitome of the law? After you left the Sky Cloud Realm, Elder Hua and the Alliance Master basically went into close cultivation. Lin Yi smiled. Qin Feiyang said, in other words, it is the people below who are managing Demon Palace now. I guess so. Lin Yi nodded. Elder Hua and the others really trusted the wrong person. I'm very curious now. Who is managing Demon Palace now and can manage it to this extent? Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered with a cold light. Then, let's go to Demon Palace to take a look? Lin Yi asked. Qin Feiyang glanced at the top floor and didn't sense Yueqing's aura. It was meaningless to continue to stay here. They might as well go to Demon Palace to take a look. For the future of Demon Palace, this time, it might be necessary to have a bloodbath. However, just as the two were about to get up and pay the bill, a young man in purple strode in. Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi were taken aback. Isn't this person Theta Wang Chuan who is arrogant and domineering in the accessory store? What a coincidence! He also came to Tianyue building. Greetings, young Master Wang. When the shop assistant saw Theta Wang Chuan, his pupils shrank slightly, and he hurriedly greeted him. It was obvious. Theta Wang Chuan was also a regular here. Is there a private room upstairs? Theta Wang Chuan asked. Sorry, it's full. The shop assistant smiled flatteringly. Full. Hearing this, Theta Wang Chuan couldn't help but frown. He scanned the hall and muttered, Perhaps the effect would be better if we were in the hall. What did you say? The waiter looked at him suspiciously. It's nothing. Theta Wang Chuan shook her head and asked, Are there any seats left in the hall? It's best if it's near the center. There's nothing in the hall either. The remaining table from before is already occupied by those two. The shop assistant pointed at Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi and looked at Theta Wang Chuan with a smile. Theta Wang Chuan followed her gaze, and a playful look appeared in his eyes. It was truly a small world for enemies to meet again. Immediately, he pointed at Qin Feiyang and Zhang Wuji and said, I want that table. That's not good. They haven't finished eating yet. The shop assistant looked at Theta Wang Chuan awkwardly. You two blind idiots. Why are you still eating so much? Tell them to scram immediately. Theta Wang Chuan said arrogantly. The shop assistant frowned. What's wrong? As a core disciple of Devil Hall, my words don't work? Theta Wang Chuan glared at the shop assistant. No, don't worry. I'll discuss with them. The shop assistant smiled flatteringly and immediately ran toward Qin Feiyang and Zhang Wuji. He sighed in his heart. If only the two building masters were here. The two building masters were close friends with Qin Feiyang, Golden Wing Wolf King, and Madman M.O. No matter how arrogant Theta Wang Chuan was, he didn't dare to be arrogant in front of the two building masters. Unfortunately, The two building masters were not here at the moment. As a shop assistant, he didn't dare to offend the core disciples of Devil Hall. Both the young man in white and the young man in black looked at this scene and secretly asked Qin Feiyong with a voice transmission, "Brother, is he the Theta Wang Chuan you just mentioned?" N. Qin Feiyong nodded. "Then you siblings are really unlucky to meet him again in a blink of an eye. Listen to your brother. Quickly pay the bill and leave, or come to sit with us. Don't provoke him again." The two advised with a voice transmission. "Thank you. Let me check the situation first." Qin Feiyong thanked them and looked at the shop assistant, who ran toward him. The shop assistant looked at Qin Feiyong and Zhang Wuji and said with an apologetic face, "Both of you heard it too. I'm really sorry. As an apology, we will waive all your expenses today." Lin Yi was about to get up. She wasn't being patient. She just didn't want to be affected by someone like Theta Wang Chuan. Such a person was just a clown in front of her. There was nothing to be angry about. But at this time, Qin Feiyong grabbed Lin Yi and looked at the shop assistant with a smile. "Do we look like people who lack money?" The shop assistant looked stiff. He thought that as long as he reasoned with them and moved them emotionally, coupled with Theta Wang Chuan's identity, he would definitely be able to convince them. But he didn't expect that they would embarrass him instead. Two bumpkins from the countryside. What's there to be arrogant about? The shop assistant suppressed the anger in his heart and whispered, "Both of you may not know his identity. His name is Theta Wang Chuan. He is a core disciple of the Demon Palace. Even I dare not offend him." "You?" Qin Feiyong looked at the shop assistant and said faintly, "Of course you don't dare to offend him because you are just a little shop assistant. But although you are just a shop assistant, your performance is really disappointing." "What do you mean?" The shop assistant was furious. How dare he humiliate him? The other guests around also looked at Qin Feiyong in astonishment. This person must have eaten a leopard's guts. How dare he be so arrogant in the face of a core disciple of the Demon Palace? What I mean is, us siblings are guests. Now we're sitting here eating. As a shop assistant here, not only did you not stand up to protect our rights, but you also asked us to leave in advance because you are afraid of the Demon Palace's disciples. I would like to ask, who is the one who asked you to do business? Yueqing or Yimiao? Qin Feiyong's face was quite ugly. How long has it been since they left the Sky Cloud realm? Not only have the Demon Palace's disciples become so rampant, but even the shop assistant of the Tianyue restaurant has become so snobbish. It seems that a good reorganization is needed. The shop assistant's face changed and shouted, "How dare you call the two tower masters by their names?" Indeed, he is bold. The two tower masters of the Tianyue restaurant are both Qin Feiyong's women. Even the tycoons of major forces have to be polite to them. The people around whispered. When Lin Yi heard these discussions, she chuckled secretly. "Brother Feiyong, when did these two building masters become your women?" Qin Feiyong's mouth twitched and said helplessly, "Don't you know? The most terrible thing in this world is gossip. There had been such rumors in the Sky Cloud realm a long time ago. They said that there was an ambiguous relationship between him and Yueqing. But there was no such thing. It was just that he was too lazy to explain, so he didn't come forward to clarify. But he didn't expect that after leaving the Sky Cloud realm for so many years, these rumors were still there. Fortunately, the people around him knew him better. He was not a promiscuous person. Otherwise, he couldn't explain it clearly even if he had 100 mouths. Get out of here immediately. Don't ever step into my Tianyue restaurant again." The shop assistant pointed to the door and looked at Qin Feiyong angrily. The young man in white and the young man in black at the next table looked at each other and couldn't help but feel powerless. They wanted to help, but they didn't dare. Whether it was the Demon Palace's disciples or the Tianyue restaurant, they couldn't afford to offend them. Hurry up and leave. Otherwise, you might not have a chance later. The young man in white transmitted his voice. Brother, thank you for your concern. Today, I'm really going to go against them. I want to see how awe-inspiring the Demon Palace's disciples and the shop assistant of the Tianyue restaurant are. Qin Feiyang smiled inwardly. Aren't you courting death? Even if you don't think for yourself. Think for your sister. She's a girl. How can she withstand such torment? The two of them tried their best to persuade him. It was obvious that they were kind-hearted. Moreover, they had a sense of justice when they saw the pain and hatred they felt for the Demon Palace. Seeing that Qin Feiyang and the young man in black didn't move, the shop assistant roared angrily. Didn't you hear me tell you to get out? Do you want me to chase you out? You're just a mere shop assistant, yet you're so overbearing, telling customers to get out so easily. I'm really curious how Yue Qing and Yimiao usually teach you. Qin Feiyang looked at the shop assistant with a cold light flashing in his eyes. Just a shop assistant? The shop assistant flew into a rage out of humiliation and smirked. Even if I'm just a shop assistant, I'm still better than a bumpkin like you. Why are you talking so much nonsense with him? Theta Wang Chuan, who was standing behind, finally lost his patience. He strode over and stared at Qin Feiyang and the young man in black. I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to get out or not? Today, we're really not going to leave. Lin Yi was also angry. She had already been merciful in the jewelry store before, but she didn't expect that they would come to provoke her, and it was a deliberate provocation. Good, very good. Theta Wang Chuan smirked, and a murderous aura permeated. Qin Feiyang looked at Theta Wang Chuan in front of him and couldn't help but feel sad in his heart. Is this the talent he cultivated with countless resources to create the Tianyin divine treasure? It's ridiculous. Theta Wang Chuan, what are you looking for me for? The atmosphere in the hall became more and more solemn. Suddenly, a crisp voice sounded. N. Qin Feiyang was taken aback. This voice seems a bit familiar. He raised his head and looked outside suspiciously. He saw a young woman in a long, white dress walking quickly into the restaurant. It's her. Looking at the woman who came in and Theta Wang Chuan, Qin Feiyang was surprised. Brother Feiyang, do you know her? Lin Yi was suspicious. Yes. Her name is Xin Xiaojia. I met her in the Shun family village when I comprehended the ultimate meaning of the law of life and death. When I first saw her, she was just a little girl. I just didn't expect that she would be with someone like Theta Wang Chuan now. Qin Feiyang frowned. Shun Xiaojia was a lively and lovely girl in his impression. She didn't hate evil, but she could at least distinguish what was good and evil. It stood to reason that she should hate people like Theta Wang Chuan. It turns out that she is from the Shen family village. Lin Yi suddenly realized, although she had been in seclusion, she still knew about the situation in the Shen family village, because the battle between Qin Feiyang and others and the king broke out in the Shen family village. At that time, Qin Feiyang and others desperately protected the Shen family village, making the Shen family village, an obscure village, the focus of the Tianyin realm. The Shun family village had also made great strides since then. The juniors of the Shun family village had basically joined the Demon Palace and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance. End of this chapter. Chapter 43:30, including Xin Xiaojia, and, back then, Qin Feiyang broke out of his cocoon and became a butterfly in the Shen family village. He comprehended the ultimate meaning of the law of life and death. Everyone in the village was influenced by the law of life and death. In short, it was a rebirth. It could be said that, whether it was an old man like Xin Mulin or a junior like Xin Xiaojia, they had all become cultivation geniuses. In addition, back then, Qin Feiyang had personally taught juniors like Xin Xiaojia Although Qin Feiyang's strength back then wasn't as strong as it was now in the Sky Cloud realm, he could be considered the number one person. To put it bluntly, even a person with mediocre talent could become a first-rate genius under his guidance. So, now, the juniors of the Shen family village had already emerged. Whether it was in the Demon Palace or the Rogue Cultivator Alliance, they had a certain prestige. Of course, the biggest reason was Qin Feiyang, because everyone knew that the Shen family village had helped Qin Feiyang. Xiaojia, at the same time, seeing Shen Xiaojia coming, Theta Wangchuan's eyes lit up and quickly greeted her. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Hurry up! Why are you looking for me? Shen Xiaojia spoke with a cold tone. Don't worry. Well, wait for me for a while. Theta Wangchuan comforted and ran to Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi again, whispering, for the last time, get out of here immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. Lin Yi frowned. You still want to take advantage of me? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly. He turned to look at the black shirt youth and the white shirt youth and smiled. Two brothers, why don't we sit here first? Sure. I just asked you and your sister to come over, but you are so stubborn. The two nodded. They were very loyal. Thank you. Qin Feiyang thanked them and gave Lin Yi a wink. Lin Yi was a little puzzled, but she was still very obedient. Immediately, the two carried the dishes on the table and walked to the table of the two young men and sat down. Brother Sanchuan, my apologies. This little brother of mine just came from the countryside and doesn't know the rules. If he offends you, please be magnanimous and don't hold it against him. The two young men were worried that Theta Wangchuan would take revenge on Qin Feiyang, so they stood up and bowed, pleading on Qin Feiyang's behalf. Lin Yi looked at the two in surprise. Seriously, these two people were really not bad. At this moment, the hall was full of guests, but among so many people who stood out to help Qin Feiyang, they were all minding their own business, afraid of offending Theta Wangchuan. However, these two young men were completely unrelated to them. They had only drunk 2 cups of wine with them before, yet now they actually stood up to help them without the slightest hesitation. He even apologized to Theta Wangchuan on behalf of Qin Feiyang. If they knew Qin Feiyang's identity, they would probably be putting on an act. But at this moment, no one here knew Qin Feiyang's identity. They didn't know Qin Feiyang's identity, but they still came to help them enthusiastically. This showed that these two young men were warm-hearted and good people. Wang Sanchuan looked at the two young men and said indifferently, Seeing that your attitude is not bad, I won't bicker with them this time. But in the future, remember to remind them that when they walk outside, it's best to be observant. Yes. Sorry. The two young men put their palms together and bowed again and again. Theta Wangchuan ignored them and turned to look at the waiter. Clean it up immediately. Okay. The waiter nodded. Theta Wangchuan ran to Shin Xiaojia again, with a flattering expression on his face. Thank you, brothers. However, aren't you afraid that Theta Wangchuan will vent his anger on you for helping us? Lin Yi glanced at Theta Wangchuan's back, looked at the two young men and asked in a low voice. Yes, of course, but there is a good saying, rely on your parents at home and rely on your friends outside. And I can't stand honest people being bullied the most. The young man in white shook his head. Yes, especially this kind of dog that bullies others. If it weren't for the Demon Palace backing him up, what is he? However, we really have to be careful, lest we be targeted by him. We won't have a good life. The young man in black transmitted his voice. Yes, we will leave later and go to the Western continent. The young man in white nodded. Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi looked at each other. They were more and more impressed with these two people. This is the kind of person that should be cultivated. It is a waste to give resources to someone like Theta Wangchuan. Lin Yi looked at Theta Wangchuan and Shin Xiaojia, who were already sitting at the table, and secretly wondered, Brother Feiyang, what do you want to do? Don't worry. Qin Feiyang smiled secretly. While drinking with the two young men, he paid attention to Theta Wang Chuan and Xin Xiaojia. The waiter had already cleaned up the table, but Theta Wang Chuan still felt that it was not clean enough. He took out a handkerchief and wiped it carefully. Then he chatted with Xin Xiaojia. They talked about very common topics. For example, how are you recently? Have you encountered any troubles? Wait, soon. The waiter brought a few dishes that looked, smelled, and smelled good. There was also a pot of superb wine. I don't drink. Just when Theta Wang Chuan was about to pour wine for Xin Xiaojia removed the wine glass and shook her head. Theta Wang Chuan was taken aback and smiled flatteringly. Then have some tea. The tea in Tianhua building is also very good. Xin Xiaojia looked at Theta Wang Chuan, frowned slightly and asked, "Are you okay? If you have something to say, just say it. If not, I will go back to cultivate." Hearing these words, Xin Xiaojia looked at Theta Wang Chuan's eyes. She didn't seem to like him very much. "You don't have to be in a hurry to cultivate." Theta Wang Chuan smiled apologetically. Then he took out an exquisite gift box from the universe ring and handed it to Xin Xiaojia. Xin Xiaojia looked at the gift box suspiciously. Theta Wang Chuan smiled and said, "I have been running around for several days to prepare this for you. I hope you will like it." "I don't deserve it." Xin Xiaojia shook her head and did not open the gift box. Theta Wang Chuan's expression stiffened. He hurriedly said, "Xiaojia, aren't you treating me like an outsider? You see, we have known each other for several years. Even if you don't like me, we can still be close friends. Isn't it normal for friends to give each other a small gift?" Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi suddenly realized. It turned out that this Theta Wang Chuan was pursuing Xin Xiaojia. Lin Yi asked with a voice transmission, "Brother Feiyang, do you think that the hairpin we saw before is in that box?" "It should be. After all this time it is for this girl." Qin Feiyang smiled secretly. It seems that this girl is quite popular with men. But after taking a closer look, the little girl back then was now slender and graceful. She did have some charm. Sigh. But the young man in white next to him suddenly sighed. "Brother, why are you sighing?" Qin Feiyang looked at the young man in white suspiciously. The young man in white secretly said, "Brother, you don't know. This woman, named Xin Xiaojia, is from the Xin family village." "Xin family village?" Qin Feiyang was taken aback. In fact, this Shen family village used to be very inconspicuous. There weren't even a few decent powerhouses, but they were lucky to meet Qin Feiyang and other lords. The young man in white smiled enviously. "I don't know about this yet." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "You just came from the countryside. It's normal that you don't know." It is said that when Qin Feiyang comprehended the ultimate meaning of the law of life and death, he traveled around the world and finally stopped in front of a small village. This small village is the Shen family village. Later, Qin Feiyang also successfully comprehended the ultimate meaning of the law of life and death in the Shen family village and became the first person in our sky cloud realm. Because of this, Qin Feiyang and the Shen family village formed a good relationship. It is also because of this relationship that all forces take good care of the people of the Shen family village, and several major forces in our sky cloud realm, Demon Palace, Heavenly Palace, Divine Palace, and Rogue Cultivator Alliance, which one has nothing to do with Qin Feiyang. So in these years, the Shen family has become a hidden, wealthy family in the sky cloud realm in one fell swoop. The reason why it is called a hidden wealthy family is because the Shen family village did not take the opportunity to expand its scale. Just like before, they have been living in seclusion in the mountains and living a very low-key life. However, the younger generation of the Shen family village is basically in various forces now, and they all show extraordinary talent. It can be said that the transformation of the Shen family village is entirely because of Lord Qin Feiyang. But it is also because of the relationship between the Shen family village and Qin Feiyang that the young disciples of various forces can't help but have the idea of taking a shortcut. The young man in white sighed. Taking a shortcut? Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi looked at each other, their eyes full of suspicion. Yes, just like this Shin Xiaojia. It is said that Lord Qin Feiyang watched her grow up. He even personally taught her cultivation. Think about it. If anyone can capture Shin Xiaojia's heart and marry her, isn't it equivalent to climbing the relationship with Qin Feiyang? The young man in white transmitted his voice. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he frowned slightly and said secretly, "Brother, do you mean that this Theta Wang Chuan doesn't really like Shin Xiaojia, but he wants to climb the backing of Qin Feiyang? Isn't it obvious?" "Obviously. I heard that a few years ago there was a big family in the Western continent. In order to climb the social ladder with the Shun family village, the family master of this big family even sent his daughter to him," the young man in black secretly said. His eyes were full of contempt. "There is such a thing?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and frowned. What happened in the end? This person called Shin Dazhuang, did he accept this patriarch's daughter? It seems that he didn't. It is said that this Shin Dazhuang is honest and straightforward. He is also a good person. Some people also say that he has the best relationship with Qin Feiyang, but I just don't know if it is true. The young man in black shook his head. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed an imperceptible smile. It seems that this kid didn't let me down. At least in terms of character. There is no big problem. Qin Feiyang looked at Theta Wang Chuan again. He couldn't help but want to laugh. Such a person wants to climb the social ladder with me? He is thinking too much. End of this chapter. They're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.